What if Bella was Aro'S salvation? Part 4 and also final part of this fiction. After ending this, what would you like to have next? Let me know in comments. Feel free. Give me ideas, help me to improve my content, give me chance to let you know you all cookies. For now let's get start to end this fiction. Dmitri. I watched Hope sleeping in her bassinet beside my desk while Felix was in court and Heidi was supervising the human staff. I should have been dealing with paperwork, and I would eventually, but I found the baby captivating. She'd stolen the hearts of everyone in the castle. And I was proud that Felix trusted me so completely that he allowed me sole responsibility for his daughter. The elites and royals had all made sure that at least one of us wasn't required in court on any given day. Felix was allowed to see to the schedule and decide who would take care of his daughter. Hope was a surprisingly accommodating baby. She barely cried at all and usually only when she needed a diaper change. The rest of the time, we enjoyed her adorable baby smile. While I read over the most recent spy reports, I was still cooing at Hope. Someday, princess, I told her, you are going to be queen and bring happiness and peace to our world as we've never known. As if she could understand me, her eyes opened, and Hope giggled. I smiled and forced myself to get at least a little work done. Nothing interesting was going on in the wider world at the moment. I learned a few secrets of covens that we rarely had contact with, but no laws were being broken, so ultimately, while occasionally interesting or even scandalous for the coven in question, it wasn't relevant to me or to the Volturi. My mind went back to when Bella was sitting on my office couch after ordering the Volturi to feed. Still injured from Athenadora's attack, with handprints clearly articulated on her porcelain human throat and still learning about our world. It hadn't been that long ago, not by vampire standards anyway. And we'd all changed so much. I tried to imagine what life might be like in 100 years or so, but was incapable of even so much as a theory. We had bets placed on how old Hope would be when her throne appeared on the dais, just waiting for her to claim it. I was betting that by 15, it would be waiting for her. Jane bet it would appear much sooner. I was hoping she was wrong. Because once again, the Volturi had a weakness. To keep Hope safe, we also needed to keep her secret. I had ordered the lower guard on duty there to scan the throne room for listening devices daily now. It was a regular gathering place for us, but it was also a public space with frequent visitors, and I wouldn't risk someone trying to exploit any potential weaknesses. The guards didn't even complain as they searched every corner of the space. Perhaps they shared my protectiveness. It was movie night tonight, and we'd set up a surprise for Hope and Felix. I was eager to see our little one's reactions to the colors and lights on the screen. Bella. The trial today took me back to another place and another time and made me so relieved that the Volturi had been my fate. A vampire, young in both years and appearance, was attracted to a human girl. She was 18, so in human standards, she was a woman, but she was still in high school. In his adoration and stupidity, he'd revealed his secrets, our secret, to her. To his dismay, she had told her best friend. Perhaps she was a gossip. Perhaps she just needed someone to confide in about the strange, wonderful, and terrifying world she'd been introduced to. I would have almost understood the vampire's actions and maybe even tried to spare him had the girl been his mate. He'd told her he was, of course. A mating might have complicated things. Might have excused him to a degree, but Marcus declared her only a love interest. The vampire, the love interest, and the friend were all executed. I had insisted that Alec numb the girl and her friend. It was simply too close to what could have been my fate for me to be comfortable. Then I did something I hadn't done in all my years in Voltera. I insisted on the court taking a recess. I was a required presence there, and I was in no shape to see anyone. I rushed from the courtroom with Jane on my heels while Aro'S issued orders, assuring me no one else would fall. And that I could take all the time I needed. I'd seen the death of vampires and humans alike in the throne room. It was in the very nature of the job, but that poor girl, I could understand her seeking someone, anyone, to confide in. I knew the confusion, joy, hope, and terror she had experienced. I could relate to the desperation to be heard when your entire worldview tipped on its axis. I'd experienced it all, in another life. The world hadn't entirely made sense for a long time after. Her death was necessary, but it pained me. I saw myself in her to an alarming degree. I sat among the roses, and Jane sat with me. She was always there, always dependable, and always knew exactly what I needed. We sat silently for a while. My emotions were a mess, and my memories tried to crowd me. Then, Jane offered me her hand. It grounded me, reminded me who I was, and pushed the memories to the back of my mind, where they lived now all the time unless something like today sparked them. She stood and pulled me up when my emotions settled, though I have no idea how she knew when I was ready. She was the one who led the way back to court. For a moment, I considered lifting my mental shield. I was more than capable of it now. And asking Angela to heal the shadows and maybe banish the memories forever. I decided against it. Darkness and light were both a part of me, and both were necessary. My memories were part of who I was. My humanity was still with me in the lost and broken girl I had once been. I knew, if I ever decided to, Aro wouldn't stop Angela from taking the shadows, but he loved every part of me and would be sad to see any part of me gone. My pain had made me stronger. My pain made me. I would not let it go. Court resumed after comforting words from Aro and embraces from both Marcus and Keys. They didn't think me weak, so I wouldn't think me weak either from fleeing to collect myself. The rest of the day was a parade of supplicants to my relief. We greeted them, they bowed. They were granted permission to be here, and when an appropriate amount of time had passed, they were excused to see the sights of our wonderful city and the surrounding areas. When court was concluded, everyone not on duty gathered for Felix's and Hope's surprise. We had decided that the first movie night with a child in our midst should be somewhat age-appropriate while still being enjoyable for the rest of us. Dmitri researched animated movies and then provided me with a list to choose my favorite. We were all aware that Hope wasn't old enough to enjoy the content of the movie and wouldn't notice if we watched something more adult, but I thought the gesture was amazingly sweet. I chose Tangled from the list of movies offered to me, followed by How to Train Your Dragon. Keys held Hope during Tangled. And even so young, she stared at the screen in wonder. I think Jane and Alec enjoyed the night too, though they'd never admit to anything that pointed out their youth. I freely admitted to being a fan of animated movies. They were fascinating, and like most movies, I could watch them multiple times without losing interest. Aro held my hand during both films. The feel of his touch was as enthralling as it had been that very first time. If anything, it had gotten better. My skin still tingled, I still felt the utter rightness, and I knew in every cell in my body that Aro was my home and always would be. Jane, I wasn't pouting this time, not even a little. But I was confused and unsettled. Hope's appearance had brought to the forefront questions I'd been contemplating, a little at a time. Since almost the moment I was changed. Everyone in the castle was so excited that Hope had been found and that there was a chance, even a little one, that eventually they would be able to find their other half. Their missing piece, someone to make them whole. Dmitri was the most obvious about it, though he didn't know that everyone realized it, and I'd never embarrass him with the information. It made me wonder if I was somehow flawed. I made my way out into the city so no one would bear witness to my quiet contemplation. While I walked around, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I might have been changed too young. I knew no matter the answer, it couldn't be altered at all now, but I didn't feel like I was lacking anything. I already felt whole. I didn't need anyone to complete me except the Volturi. I didn't long for love. I didn't want sex. I had all the companionship I needed. Was I flawed? That, wanting more, feeling seemed universal among our unmated guards. Emmett wasn't looking or wanting anything. But Rosalie had been a nightmare. She'd yelled at him and belittled him constantly, though we'd pretended not to see. No doubt he was recovering. He'd returned to Voltera from witnessing her death with words about closure and ending a chapter of his life, but he was hurting. I wasn't hurting, honestly, I wasn't. I was happy, satisfied, fulfilled, dedicated. And I didn't know if that meant something was wrong with me. I didn't know how Alec felt. Was being my brother and part of the Volturi family enough for him, or was he just waiting for the opportunity to fill a hole I didn't know existed? The only way I'd find out was to talk to him. I didn't want to upset him, though, if he didn't feel the same way I did. I didn't want anyone to see me as broken or missing something. This mate thing was just confusing. I was just fine as I was. Most of us were. They just didn't see things the same way. It was clear how much Aro had healed Bella. Bella had healed Aro, too. Marcus and Angela were an excellent couple, and both were so very alive. Heidi and Felix were perfect for each other and hadn't wanted anything until they'd been confronted with the idea and reality of Hope. I was happy for them. I was happy for all of them, I just didn't want the same for myself. I was not broken, even though memories of fire sometimes invaded where they shouldn't. Amber, when she'd been with us, assured me that not being able to completely forget something like that was completely normal. I kind of wish she were still around so I could ask her about this. She seemed very wise and had studied a great deal for her profession. The approaching footsteps were almost too quiet for me to hear. There was no beating heart to go with them, though. I stepped into a shadow. I didn't want to be found. Not when I was so off balance. I debated going the other way, or maybe going to feed in another town, but if anyone had spotted me leaving, Bella might have followed to check on me. And I refused to run from her. If I did, something crazy would happen, and she'd have to deal with it on her own. I didn't doubt her capable of handling most any situation, and likely doing it with style. But that wasn't who she was, it wasn't who I was, and it wasn't who we were together. I wasn't so surprised to see Bella when the pair turned the corner, but I was surprised to see that Dmitri had accompanied her. Bella stopped near where I was. Her voice was gentle, even for her. "Come on out, Janie. You know I can't find you when you're cloaked in shadows," she said. My sigh revealed me, and I found myself in a huge Bella hug. "You can go back to the castle," she told Dmitri. When he seemed uncertain, she continued, "I promise if a bunch of stray marauding vampires wander by, Jane will zap them and I'll turn them to powder. We can take bets to see if it's possible for anything to reassemble from pieces that small." Dmitri smiled, nodded, and turned to make his way home. He was confident in Bella's abilities now, too. We all were. She'd become quite dangerous. When Dmitri was gone, Bella admitted, "Emmett saw you go and called me. He said something was wrong." They've been a little insistent that Dmitri track you. He called me an annoying little sister. I'll take it as a compliment. Bella took my hand, and we made our way down the street. She was quiet and just went in the direction I wanted until I was driven to explain. "I don't want a mate," I declared. "Does that mean something is wrong with me?" "I don't want a baby," Bella admitted. "It seems to be the ultimate unfulfilled desire of female vampires. Especially since it's impossible. Do you think anything is wrong with me?" I shook my head but said, "Maybe I was changed too young." Bella squeezed my hand, and we walked further down the road. We were all once human, and there are a lot of different kinds of humans in the world. I worked with a lady at the newspaper after I left university who was really outgoing. She was funny, smart, and extremely independent. She saw no need for a man. Not for a date, not for sex, and definitely not for a relationship. Guys approached her constantly when we visited clubs. But she was totally content with her friends and family. I felt a little sorry for some of the guys she blew off. She told me one night that the dating scene wasn't a place she wanted to be because she was enough, all by herself. She was happy with who she was. She saw absolutely no need to change anything. There was nothing wrong with her. She wasn't broken like I was. She had everything she needed and everything she wanted. I kind of envied her confidence and self-sufficiency. She was an adult woman, not a vampire, but there was nothing wrong with her. She was just different from me. There is nothing wrong with you either. Bella and I talked and wandered aimlessly through town until the sun's rays started to warm the sky. I decided it was kind of nice to have someone care so completely that they set the world's best tracker on you just to make sure you weren't suffering an identity crisis. Best of all, after we got back to the castle, it wasn't brought up again, not even by Emmett or Dmitri. I felt thoroughly loved but not embarrassed or smothered. Emmett, watching Rosalie meet her end was difficult, and I didn't know why I felt it was so necessary to do it. The end was peaceful for her. She didn't see death coming in any way. She'd been given so many opportunities to change, not the least of them, I like to think, was my support and nearly unconditional love. A small part of me wondered if this had been inevitable since her change, but it hadn't been. I was surrounded by vampires daily who were capable of changing and growing. They could adapt to the changes in Voltera and out in the wider world. Hell, Jane and Alec had almost been burned at the stake, and they didn't walk through the world holding a grudge. The return to Voltera was quiet. Alec didn't oaf. Are useless words that wouldn't have actually comforted me. Still, on my arrival home, the lower guards made it their mission that I not spend too much time alone. In the process, my friendships deepened and strengthened in a way I hadn't anticipated. Some of the upper guard plied me with offers for ways to pass the time, too. Even one of the elites or Bella found me on occasion to check on me and offer support. Whether it meant sitting in companionable silence or playing loud, almost drunken games of poker. I was grateful for all of it. I was a person here. My needs were seen to, my opinion sought out, and I felt like I mattered. Recovery came slowly, but it did come. Even now, after just a short passage of time, the days were a bit brighter, and I found myself joining in the play the perimeter guard engaged in as we worked. I was going to be okay. I wasn't sure if breaking my bond with Rosalie had sentenced me to eternity alone, but I was able to accept that outcome, and it was infinite. More preferable than being sentenced to a lifetime of Rosalie's misery and vitriol. I wasn't happy yet, however, I was content. Happiness would come, I knew it. Felix. I hoarded moments with Heidi. And Hope like the precious gifts they were. Angela brought her camera by to immortalize every first moment my daughter took. Vampire memory is flawless, but I still wanted the records just to look back on and reminisce. Hope had been with us for 2 weeks when Bella pointed out, extremely gently, a lack in our parenting skills. We had forgotten that humans require sunlight. It provided them with vitamins and kept their moods more stable. From that day on, Hope was taken to the garden to get some sun and explore the pretty flowers. Adam took her on walks around town from time to time as well, us to make sure her world wasn't too small, and so she could see the beauty that surrounded us, as his skin didn't react the way ours did in the sun. Hope's growth seemed natural and sustained in a way that Adam's hadn't. His mind had outtraced even his quickly growing body. Hope's progression was a slow, fluid process. When she'd taken her first step, I laughed at my panicking friends looking for ways to make the castle safer for a child. Every statue became a climbing hazard that needed to be secured in some way or placed out of reach. She had reached the age of 2 when her gift was revealed for the first time. Our girl was really fond of Dmitri, and they were coloring a picture of a horse together when Hope asked about the girl with blonde hair and blue eyes that she saw when he held her hand. Dmitri handled it perfectly. Of course, though I could see that he wanted to ask endless questions, he simply said, "She is someone who might be very important to me one day." Still, when they went back to coloring, I made my way to the throne room to inform the kings and queens that a sliver of Hope's gift was active already. Keys came immediately to assure himself that our baby wasn't in any way upset by what she'd seen. He ended up joining the coloring party and delaying the day's visits and even a trial. Seeing Keys show a soft and sensitive side reassured me that the future mating between them was not ill-conceived. He would be able to provide for her emotionally as well as in every other way. I still wish my baby's fate weren't bound so tightly, but if it weren't, we might have never gotten the opportunity to know her. Just yesterday, Keys had acquired finger paints and introduced Hope to the liquid colors on the floor of his impeccable studio. They were both a mess blindingly happy at the end of their art lesson. Their work was tacked up on the wall in our apartment once it dried. The elites had lost some of their precision in the last 2 years. Hope had softened us somewhat, and that concerned me because there was always another threat somewhere on the horizon. I brought up the topic with Dmitri, and he assured me that we were still capable of terrorizing the masses if it was necessary. Still, training became a little more regimented again. I was reassured. The Romanian threat was still on the horizon. Someday we would confront them, and we needed to be at our best when we did. Plus, there were always upstarts that appeared and tried to cause trouble. It was expected, even anticipated on occasion. Bella. The duties that Aro and I saw to increase. As Hope grew and Keys became enmeshed in her life. Neither of us minded, as long as we still had adequate time alone together. The bond was stronger between us than it had ever been. I had expected and even anticipated that the draw would fade and settle over time. That was not the case. It grew daily. Even Angela was taking over Keys's duties in places. Everything was going smoothly until Aro announced that it was time for a 100-year census. Angela and I immediately suggested that it be postponed. It was hard enough to hide Hope from our daily guests, let alone a castle full of visitors coming for a party. Treaty negotiations, and to be counted among our numbers. My mate explained that delaying such a necessary event would make our entire community suspicious and likely cause long-lasting problems. That was unacceptable, so I suggested that we send Felix and Heidi away for the duration of the event so that there was nothing abnormal for vampires to see during their visit to the castle. Marcus tried to say that while Heidi's absence could be explained by a fishing expedition or countless other duties, Felix was too expected, too much of a presence to go missing. His bulky form and imposing presence were necessary to the event's success. There was a long and drawn-out debate, but ultimately I won. All the elite guards were figureheads in our community, and it seemed to invite danger to send Heidi and Hope out into the world without the best protection we had. Chaos erupted, and I was drawn into the madness. Aro issued orders left and right, and the royal calligrapher who must have the most boring job in the castle most of the time, became quite a hot commodity. The poor man worked around the clock writing, mailing, and tallying invitations and RSVPs. Layla's me and skill also became quite sought after. She looked a little harried as she was sketching her latest creation for me. Still, her sketch was fantastic. She designed a wonderful gown that was red at the bodice and became a deep purple at the hem. The effect was magical, and as always, I was effusive in my praise of her skill and imagination. We chose a clear shoe with beaded accents to finish off the look. Jane was designed a wonderfully elegant, black creation with a halter top neckline and flowing waist. Jane was going to be stunning and elegant. There were mountains of correspondence to see too. Most were highly, even overly, flattering and trying to ingratiate themselves with me before the big event. Angela and I compared letters to see who received the most outrageous remarks from guests that would soon be walking our halls. When Aro informed me that the Romanians were required to attend and be counted along with everyone else, I admit I started secretly planning their leader's demise. Circumstances had prevented me from seeking them before now, but they would be so close. Aro saw through me and told me that, as this was a required event, everyone was granted safe passage and immunity unless they did something obviously stupid during the event, like feeding in Voltera. Aro laughed at my pout when my plans went to ruin, but kissed me gently and promised that he, too, would help Marcus gain justice at the right time and in the right place. As always, Aro understood me and my drive for justice. He didn't think less of me for my moments of imagined violence when the target fully deserved it. He understood and accepted it. He loved every part of me. I was strangely energized by the thought of coming events. I still would have preferred to delay things, but that was an impossibility. And this would be my first opportunity to interact with most of the covens that scattered themselves all over the world. I realized that this was a drastic change from my formerly easily overwhelmed self. I acknowledged the change, but didn't question it. I had grown and changed a great deal over the years and had no doubt that the trend would continue. Jane and I renewed my knowledge of covens and their various skills and abilities in quiet moments so I would be able to appear both caring and informed. Ignorance had always made me nervous, and I didn't want to experience it at this event in any way. While we were seeing to plans and preparing to immerse ourselves in the plots and conflicts between covens, I made sure that Felix, Heidi, and Hope were going to be far away. Felix tried to argue for staying close, just in case his presence was needed. He stopped being argumentative and became concerned when I told him that I didn't care if the castle was on fire. He was not to return until every visitor had left the castle. Felix asked if I felt danger approaching, and I assured him that I expected this gathering to go as smoothly as they always had. My instincts had been proven right over the years. I told him that there would likely be heated discussions, lots of posturing, and Aro might have to stop me from assassinating Stefan and Vladimir, but all that was to be expected. Felix's laughter boomed, but I still wasn't able to convince him to venture farther from us than Paris, so we prepared the safe house for them in the city. I was sure Hope would find the city absolutely magical. Santiago became highly integrated into the elite guards in the lead up to events. He stepped into Felix's place, even in the preparations. By the time guests arrived, I expected them to be a seamless team. Felix dedicated himself to electronic surveillance during this time so he could assure himself and the rest of us that no nefarious plans were brewing with any of our problem covens. I was oddly eager to meet these covens that had the nerve to skirt close to laws and require such a degree of surveillance. It was an odd reaction from me, but I was confident in my ability to protect us if things became grim, so they became a curiosity and entertainment to me. I was secretly planning to venture to Paris at least a couple of times while our visitors were in residence to see Hope. I was terrified of missing some milestone or experience, and the thought of the distance between us made me feel uncomfortable, wild, and a little helpless. I found myself surprised that Bella confronted me with my duty to the vampire world and my commitment not to lead danger anywhere near Hope. Our queen had become frightfully intuitive over the years. She ended her NDLY worded caution by saying that while she was confident I would destroy anyone who dared follow me from the castle in spectacular ways, it was unnecessary to place Hope in danger this way. She also pointed out that we were skating our own laws on a technicality and that if Hope's existence was revealed at this point, other vampire women would start seeking out their own human children to raise. And she didn't think anyone wanted that to become common practice. I was dissatisfied that my plans had been foiled, but I had to admit that Bella was right on every point. I refused to sulk, even in front of Bella, so I got back to work. There was much for even the triumvirate to do to prepare for approaching negotiations. Felix. Once I got over the details of what was happening at the castle and being unable to protect its residents during the census, I realized that I had the opportunity for almost 7 days out of the castle, away from any responsibility, and was really taking a vacation with my wife and daughter. Excitement might have overwhelmed me a bit while I researched Paris, and I became totally involved in planning an adventure for Hope. I did my best not to overplan things while ensuring that this would be a wonderfully memorable experience for my wife and child. We were scheduled for plays, tours, museums, and even an aquarium. I was also determined to take her to a real movie theater while we were there. Hope had only experienced the one Bella had created. I asked Angela to accompany me to the camera store in town and help me pick out the best, least complicated camera available. I knew that the elites, the queens and keys, would all insist on seeing pictures of every experience. While I was technically savvy, I was by no means a photographer, so simplicity was important to me. And clear photographs would be important to me and everyone else on our return. When we were ready to leave for Paris, Dmitri assured me he'd had the entire city scouted by Lower Guar DS and promised me he had everything well in hand at the castle. I felt a bit like a little boy myself as Heidi buckled Hope into her car seat for the trip, and we made our way from the castle. This was going to be such an adventure. Bella, our first guests, arrived early, and we were all prepared and present to greet them. Dmitri was his usual highly efficient self, and Santiago played his part perfectly. Though it didn't stop the questions about Felix's absence. Some of our guests seemed genuinely concerned. Some were just being nosy. Still, I performed my hostess duties with a grace that surprised even me. Every guest seemed pleased with their reception at our home and with the rooms or suites they were provided. Our lower guard moved as one unit, making sure that each guest's belongings made it to their temporary lodgings. I was pleased to see Emmett moving with them. He fit here, and I was secretly hoping that after his 50-year sentence ended, he would choose to stay with us permanently. The elite guard was impeccable both in appearance and manners, greeting the guests. We even kept our serious faces on and didn't grin at each other between guests. I felt very mature and queenly. I made sure to compliment everyone when the meet and greet was over. Guards roamed the halls except in the royal wing while everyone prepared for the evening's ball. Security would be very high during the event. I had been adequately prepared for what to expect from all aspects of the celebrations. I was putting the finishing touches on my makeup when Jane knocked. She came in offering me diamond-encrusted hairpins to add some extra sparkle to my updo. She even added a little additional liner to my eyes and helped me with the lacing on my dress. Layla still refused to consider any other possible closure for her designs. So I still required assistance. Jane had kept her promise, even over the years, to help me dress when I wore Layla's designs. Aro and I, guarded closely by Jane, made our way down to the ballroom. The evening started with drinks and conversation. Aro was by my side, always touching, as we circulated and conversed with individuals and covens Aro had been acquainted with for centuries. And I was just getting to know. I even managed to be quite polite to Stefan and Vladimir. Dmitri's observations joined Jane's during that conversation. Honestly, did they think I was going to take them out on the dance floor? I saw the moment Dmitri realized I was assessing their movements, their potential, and their weaknesses while engaging in small talk, just the way he had taught me. He gave me a slightly evil smile and a nod in acknowledgement, then went back to circulating and pretending that he wasn't guarding me before anyone noticed. I met many vampires, and I thought it was very likely I might build friendships with them over the years, given an adequate opportunity, and a few that I could tell would be trouble just from a brief bit of small talk. As even introduced to a few who seemed to lack common sense to an extent that I wondered how they'd kept their immortal lives this long. I lifted my mental shield to share my opinions with Aro'S silently. We'd communicated this way in court semi-frequently, and he hid his surprise when the barrier blocking my mind disappeared admirably. His smile became just a little too bright at times at my assessment of our guests. But with the quirky personality he showed the world, I had doubts anyone saw anything as abnormal. Silence fell when the Whitlocks arrived at the gathering. They had mastered the art of making an entrance quite clearly. I allowed myself to greet Jasper as warmly as I wanted, and Aro offered him a firm handshake. He seemed to be well recovered after both the Cullen's manipulatio of him and the ending of the Southern Wars. He looked genuinely happy, and I was glad for him. I knew that not much was possible besides casual conversation with so many ears turned in my direction. Still, Jasper could feel my emotions. He knew I was glad to see him. When the dancing started, I fell into Aro'S embrace eagerly and was even able to stay there for a few songs without anyone cutting in. When I thought of Keys, Aro escorted me to him and guided Jane in a spin around the dance floor. Once I had observed Keys's expression, I felt a need to reassure him that Hope was fine and probably loving every new experience she was given. He was uncomfortable, though not so obviously that anyone but the royals and the elite would recognize it. I wished he had Aro's gift or that there was some way to offer comfort. But it just wasn't possible. I offered the reassurance I could with my presence. Eventually, I was passed from person to person for dances among the gathering. I enjoyed myself immensely, most of the time. Somehow, when I wasn't, or when I was forced to dance with someone I didn't want to, Dmitri, Aro, or Keys interrupted. Jasper was even guilty of it once. I understood how Jasper had done it. But what had Dmitri, Aro, and Keys done? Were there now hand signals or something for when to rescue me? None of my dancing companions was so bad until Stefan cornered me into dancing with him. I was never going to like this man because of what had happened with Diademe, but he complimented me with obvious falseness, and his every word held a hidden barb. I found myself wondering if turning just one guest to dust would be such a huge faux pas. Rescue came in the form of a falsely apologetic Dmitri insisting that there was an important matter that must be seen to immediately. Dmitri went so far as to guide me to the gardens where party noise should keep guests from hearing and chided me lightly for my apparently obvious wish to kill a guest. We shared a quiet laugh over our murderous desires and returned to the party when I promised him I would be more aware of my surroundings and not get cornered by either Romanian again. I was escorted by Dmitri back to Aro's embrace, and I lifted my shield. The light in his eyes and near laughter on his lips was impressively well hidden as we danced. Angela was absolutely radiant. She wore a dusky blue color that suited her perfectly, and looked blissfully happy. I observed her being escorted around the floor by Marcus. She even took my lead and joined Keys for several turns around the dance floor. Still, she didn't seem to have unpleasant vampire elements trying to approach her intermittently, and I wondered why not, while at the same time, my friend was being spared the bad company. I found myself wishing I could ask Angela what she thought about various guests, then gave up the idea. Privacy was a near impossibility in the entirety of the city at the moment. I found myself dancing with an attractive, but rangy-looking vampire named Garrett. He was both funny and charming, even as he expressed his displeasure at having to attend. He explained that Jasper had told him I was kind and genuine and that he wanted to meet me since he was required to attend useless meetings with double-talking vampires. I was enjoying myself so much with this brave and irreverent male that I laughed out loud. We even shared a second dance. I found his forthright nature refreshing in this situation and very amusing. I couldn't imagine being brave enough to insult the Volturi, even mildly, in our own castle. I looked over, and Dimitri's lips were twitching slightly. Apparently, he liked this guy too. This was someone I could be friends with if he didn't despise the entire institution of the Volturi. Still, he made a good companion for a few songs. There were occasional rumblings about Carlisle's absence as the night progressed. Apparently, some of the guests had expected us to allow his presence at a required event like a census. I heard the words, "worse than death," passed around a few times. I found myself wondering what Garrett's overly frank opinion would have been on that situation. I'd bet it would have brought more laughter. I hid my smile in Aro's embrace as he held me and guided us in the last dance as the sun rose. I asked Aro, via his gift, to find some way to reassure Keys. To those who knew him, he was beginning to resemble a caged tiger again. Aro nodded, and when the dance finished, we exited and made our way home while pretending the walls offered any real privacy. The next few days were going to be a challenge for all of the Volturi, I realized. We were close and couldn't express it for the full house we had if we wanted to keep our masks in place. Dmitri, I was pleased been able to offer my queen respite when she was an inch away from murdering someone on the dance floor, but I admitted to myself that Bella needed to learn to be more aware of who was in the wings. To be her next dance partner before the census came around again. I would also have to be aware of her reactions to some of our guests during formal meetings. Her game face was good, but not quite as good as it should be when she found someone unpleasant. Her instincts were nearly 100% correct, but she needed to be able to hide her true feelings better. Her mask had fallen completely. Why, when it was met with Garrett's irreverent honesty? I understood that, though. I found him humorous as well. Ultimately, the entire night was a success. The only change I experienced from the last census, besides my dedication to guarding the queen, was that I didn't search the eyes of random women this time to see if my mate might be here. Hope had declared the girl had blue eyes and blonde hair. She was human. I showered and changed clothing quickly and then went to see that the royals made it to the throne room without being stopped for unwelcome and unnecessary conversations on the way. Census was always a stressful time, but I found the lack of openness and friendliness among the guards especially displeasing this time. We'd all grown closer since Bella's arrival. Appearing solemn with each other was now forced behavior and no longer the natural occurrence it had once been. Bella, I insisted that the nomads, who, on the whole, just craved their own company, be seen first during business negotiations. Aro was eager to engage in negotiations but conceded my point. The parade of vampires began. There were many more of us in the world than I'd thought. A few of the nomads wished to stay with us for a short time to take advantage of the archives. I thought a comfortable bed and a hot shower also contributed to their desires, but I didn't say so. All were granted their wish. When Garrett appeared, I expected to be entertained and did my best not to reveal my enjoyment. However, when the audience was almost complete, I felt driven to address Garrett. If you run into trouble out there and need assistance, I expect you to call me. Perhaps not everyone here talks in circles, Garrett said. I hope I have no reason to contact you, but your offer is highly appreciated, my lady. With a nod, Garrett made his way out into the world again, his audience finished. I was glad I'd met him. I found the negotiations that followed to be mostly a useless exercise. We addressed feeding territory issues for multiple covens. I was almost brought to laughter by the sheer audacity of some of these people, over and over. However, I didn't feel so bad when I spotted even Dmitri's lips twitching. The Romanians had the nerve to attempt to claim leadership over their country. Of course, their generous offer was firmly declined. Angela only barely managed to keep her tone polite during the discussion. I had never seen her come so close to losing her temper. Days passed as we spoke to every visitor. I found it exhausting, and I could no longer even sleep. I wondered frequently what Hope was doing. I had seen Paris with Aro, but I was sure that everything would look bigger and even more imposing through a child's eyes. I hoped that Felix documented her adventure thoroughly. I was eager to end the negotiations and become a family again. The Whitlock Coven's audience was a wonderful change of pace. We were informed that there were no issues, just a new stallion and several mares. As they were expanding their horse ranch, it was a pleasant diversion to be informed of their many successes, which increased my pride in Jasper's accomplishments. Before they left, they issued an invitation for Aro and me to visit. I was surprised, but thanked them genuinely and promised to consider the offer. When it was time for the Denali's audience, I found myself nervous. He had been integral in Hope's introduction to our lives, and Hope's existence couldn't become common knowledge. Elizor played his part magnificently, but it caused me to analyze, yet again, if raising Hope was the right thing for us to be doing. It was undeniably true that I wouldn't have allowed Rosalie a baby and felt no guilt over my harsh words to her outside of Dimitri's office. I also wouldn't allow this behavior among the vampire community. I was still disturbed that Hope's fate was so sealed that her turning as an adult was something required of her. It felt wrong to rob a child of their choices. Still, Hope was a special case. She was gifted, and we never anticipated finding her at all. Even in my darkest imaginings, I never contemplated finding her as an infant, but once she was found, leaving with caretakers who didn't even bother to name her, even with guards, would have felt like the bigger injustice. Had Felix and Heidi approached me in the same way Rosalie had, begging to be allowed a random child, I would have refused them, too. But they were ideal and loving parents to little Hope. My words might not have been so harsh had it been Felix and not Rosalie, but it would have still been a "this will never happen" kind of situation. Ultimately, I concluded yet again that we had made the right decisions in the situations we'd been placed in, even if it was necessary to keep those decisions and Hope secrets for some years yet to come. That didn't even consider the fact that Hope was Keys's mate. Once he was introduced to her, at any age, her fate was sealed. Mates, even in unconventional situations, were absolutely inviolable. Hope was healthy, happy, growing, loved, well supervised, supported, and going to grow into her own woman. We were doing all we could. I admitted, to myself that this would be a gray area that I would never feel completely comfortable with, and refocused on being present in the throne room. Sometimes decisions and morality weren't black or white. This was one of those situations. Elizor was excusing himself and his coven. I would find a way to thank him in the future for his loyalty and for keeping our secrets, I decided. When even Aro'S eyes started glossing over from the repetitive and relative boredom of so many audiences, I insisted on a 30-minute break. When Aro grew tired of negotiations, it had gone on too long. He thrived in debates of any kind. Angela made her way from the room at the suggestion of a break, and Aro admitted it had gone on a little long with a light laugh. I followed Angela. I hoped she was heading for the gardens. But I wanted some time with her. I found her with Vladimir, pushed into a corner as Vladimir loomed over her. I feared for Angela's safety and Marcus's sanity. Barely holding on to my temper, I cleared my throat unnecessarily. Vladimir jumped back from Angela, knowing whatever his intentions had been, they were spoiled with witnesses present. We thought you had already left, I offered to Vladimir in a light tone. I called for Santiago, explaining to him that apparently Vladimir had lost his way as his audience was already complete. As Santiago was leading him away, Vladimir's gaze met mine, and in a threatening tone, he said, "We'll be seeing you." My response was filled with equal coldness and threat. "You most certainly will," I declared. The surprise at my only thinly veiled return threat seemed to surprise him. Then he was being led away. Marcus appeared, as did Aro. Jane was on their heels. Angela rushed into Marcus's arms and sobbed. I suggested that we take an hour off. Everyone agreed immediately, and Angela and Marcus made their way out into the gardens. I hoped that the beauty of the gardens and her mate's embrace comforted her. I didn't think she'd ever experienced a NY thing like the looming threat Vladimir had been. I approached Dmitri when I re-entered the throne room. In a tone too low for even Aro to hear, though I'd inform him later, I instructed Dmitri to begin focusing on the Romanian threat. They had threatened Angela. She was the most innocent of us, and I found that unacceptable. They had threatened me. It was more understandable, whether the Romanians knew it or not. I was well able to see to my own safety. Still, they were already guilty of killing Diademe. It was time to end them permanently, before their threats grew into real danger. I was sure Marcus would be equally motivated since they'd made Angela cry. He wouldn't take his mate being mistreated in any way lightly. Dmitri nodded without even a hint of surprise. Felix, little Hope say, Emmett to enjoy the aquarium most of any of the locations on our tour of Paris. I hadn't anticipated such a fascination with aquatic creatures, but now Bob, her stuffed shark, had become her favorite stuffed playmate. She'd enjoyed all of the locations we'd explored, except for the movie theater. Perhaps I hadn't chosen a good spot to see the movie, or perhaps the theater we had created was simply superior to public options. But even I had found the sticky, soda-covered floor a bit gross. When Hope had declared it icky, while her little shoes stuck to the floor, we decided that a walk through Aro'S and a stop somewhere nice for dessert would be a better option. We didn't stay for the movie. On our wanderings through the streets, we found a bookstore, and Hope guided us inside the story PLA. CE, to see if we might be able to find her a new bedtime story about creatures that I could only guess might be similar to mermaids. My daughter's imagination was already a rich place. I decided that I'd begin asking Adam to take Hope to story time at the bookstore in Voltera. There might even be some opportunity for interaction with other children at the library. On our final day in Paris, we sighted both the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre. I made sure to follow Charlie's lead and pick Hope up so she could study her favorite pieces as closely as possible. We took our time exploring and only left when Hope fell asleep in Heidi's arms. On our last night in the city, I admitted to myself that the vacation had been more magical than even I had expected, but I was eager to go home. I made my way to a nearby store and purchased a photo album and had all the many pictures we'd taken printed out. While Hope slept, Heidi and I assembled the album and reminisced about every moment. I comforted Heidi, who was not quite missing home as much as I was, that this was far from our last vacation. There would be many as Hope grew. Our family would understand. We loaded the car as dawn lit the sky and started our trip home. I anticipated that when we arrived back in the castle, Keys and the elites would claim Hope's time as none of them had been able to call and check on her over the last 6 days. I would enjoy the time alone with Heidi and settle back in at my desk while our family saw to Hope's entertainment. The trip home seemed to pass slowly, but I held Heidi's hand the entire way. I was just as grateful today that she'd come to the Volturi as I had been all those years ago. When Voltera came into view, Hope shouted, "Home," so loudly that it startled me. Apparently, our baby had missed Voltera. I was a little bit surprised that both Dmitri and Keys awaited us. I had texted that we were approaching, but hadn't expected a welcoming committee. Heidi and I unloaded the SUV, and Keys whisked Hope off. I anticipated they'd be in Keys' studio if I needed them and waved back as Hope was carried away from me. Dmitri helped us with the SUV and updated me on Bella and Marcus's renewed vendetta against the Romanians. That coven was exceptionally stupid to be confrontational with our queens. To issue even a veiled threat to one of our queens, let alone both, was downright suicidal. I was impressed, though not entirely surprised, that Bella had returned their threat. Dmitri and I both chuckled over Dmitri scolding her for her murderous tendencies during the ball. Yes, this was home. Keys. Hope was home. I tried to whisk her away to my studio, but the elites kept appearing to greet her. I didn't let my annoyance show, but I desperately wanted to show her the set of paintbrushes, complete with big, soft grips, that I'd found for her in her absence. I'd found her a suitably sized canvas and was eager to see what she might try to create in her first experience with real paints and brushes. I made sure I didn't get annoyed, at least not visibly, with the elites. They loved her too, and they would protect her all the more carefully for that. Still, I was celebrating. When Hope got the first glimpse of her own baby-sized easel. "Help, Kai," Hope asked, so I got down on my knees and helped her guide the paint over the canvas. When we'd finished, and she declared her creation complete, she embraced me tightly with oil paint slick hands. The moment was perfect and exactly what I'd been needing over the last week of debates and audiences. Bella had made me part of the family, but it was Hope that showed me where I truly belonged. I returned Hope to Heidi before the paint could dry so that she could shower and remove the oils from her skin, but the contentment I'd been missing didn't leave me. I thought I might attempt to accompany them on the next vacation they took. This week had been a challenge. Felix presented me with a photo album full of pictures he'd taken for me and stayed with me while I examined it, sharing stories of Hope's many adventures. She looked absolutely enthralled with the sea creatures at the aquarium. Every photo was a discovery and my own little adventure. When I offered Felix the photo album back when we'd completed it, he assured me that it was mine. That small gesture meant a great deal to me. Dmitri, Hope squealed. I'd just been upgraded to this version of my name from my nickname Demi. I smiled every time I heard it. Hope was 5 and we'd just finished her very first history lesson. Bella had insisted that we acquire textbooks for Hope so she learned the details of the human world as well as the vampire one. I added stories of things I had witnessed in the course of my life that were relevant to the sea. Content provided in the books both to entertain and educate Hope. She was now educated on relevant subjects by an array of teachers. The queens shared the teaching of English. They taught content from textbooks and also helped Hope read age-appropriate stories. Identifying potentially favorite stories had become a friendly competition between them. Hope loved it all, except for math. Felix taught math and Hope struggled to understand the meaning of numbers. Art was by far her favorite class. I suspected the teacher played into that as much as the subject. Keys was fascinated with every noticeable change in Hope as she grew. He almost threw a celebration the first day she was able to grip her paintbrushes on her own. When Hope made her way to the library for her Italian lesson with Marcus, I refocused on my duties. Bella had been watching and waiting for the Romanians to commit a crime to give us a reason to take them all out, instead of just Stefan and Vladimir. Perhaps they suspected they were being monitored because they stayed firmly on the right side of the law. Felix was convinced we weren't seeing everything, so I was back to sorting through endless reports of wiretaps, internal and external spies. Bella was determined, and the Romanians were not likely to stay sufficiently careful, so we'd find cause for her vendetta eventually. Personally, I felt threatening our queens was sufficient, but the royals were convinced that their demise needed to be justifiable to the entire vampire world. It made sense, in a way, but part of me wished I'd just let Bella start the battle at the ball. It might have raised eyebrows, but it would have been done. Carile. I had just returned from an almost satisfying hunt. Almost satisfying was the best I hoped for anymore. Edward's demise had not driven Esme and me closer. If anything, things were more distant. I could only remember the last time she'd spoken to me because of vampire memory. I sat down and leaned against a tree, waiting for Esme to return from her hunt. We no longer attended to this chore together or even in proximity to each other. Still, Esme had been gone a long time. I felt no tug on the bond, it offered no hint of which direction to begin a search, so I waited. Then I waited more. When darkness passed and dawn came, I didn't know what to do. She should have returned many hours ago. I'd had no clue through the bond of any danger. So she still lived. The bond hadn't splintered in any way, so she wasn't hurt. I stayed leaning against that tree, not daring to go for another hunt, until the last week of our allowed time in this location passed. I knew, deep inside, long before I stood from my position, that Esme was never going to return. I was clueless about her location. Our bond seemed frozen, no tea allowing even a hint of where she might be. It seemed like it should be an impossibility, and with our lack of socialization, I was sure Esme hadn't met someone with an unknown gift. It felt entirely wrong to walk from that clearing alone. Even in her seeming hate and disgust, Esme had at least provided companionship. Still, she wasn't coming back, and I set aside the idea that I might allow myself to petrify into the tree if I stayed there long enough. I walked into the afternoon sun with no plan, all alone. Aro was firmly in his element today. Feuding covens always entertained him. This particular case was two covens claiming the same member for their respective covens. Neither group considered the option of simply asking the vampire in question which coven he preferred, or whether he preferred to walk the world alone until he found less argumentative options. The throne room was silent when Aro offered to split the man in half as a compromise. The mouths of the covens fell open, and my giggle slipped out completely uninvited, which caused their mouths to descend further. Before I lost all control of my slightly twisted moment of humor, I addressed the vampire in question. He expressed his motivation to seek out a wholly different coven where he might belong and his opinion might be considered relevant. I wished him well, as did the rest of the royals, and the VA. Empire exited the throne room with Santiago leading him from the city. When the covens were dismissed after they started arguing over the folly of approaching the Volturi to solve their problem, the looks on their faces were priceless. I always thought that every case the Volturi saw would be a matter of life and death. I had expected that the Volturi were so feared that time wasters and idiots wouldn't dare approach. How wrong I had been. Some of the cases we were subjected to were silly and completely inconsequential. Others could have been solved, much like this one, with just a little bit of communication. Such cases reaffirmed that I was in the right place and that idiots existed in every world, even the vampire world. When little hands muscled open one of the doors to the throne room, conversation in the room halted. And Felix made his way over to assist Hope in opening the heavy door. Hope was slightly out of breath but still ran to me with a book in hand and climbed up onto my lap. She opened her book and, with an urgency that only seemed to be exhibited by children, pointed to one of the words. "I don't understand this one, Auntie Bella. What does it mean?" I examined the book. "Beauty and the Beast. That word is beautiful," I explained. "It means very pretty, like you." Hope attempted to pronounce the word in question a few times, and after I said it slowly for her again, she got the pronunciation correct. She ran from the room with a quick thank you. Felix was dismissed from the remainder of audiences for the day. The upper guard he'd chosen to guard Hope was obviously insufficient since the girl made it all the way past reception to the throne room and opened the door without being intercepted. It could have placed her in danger, and that was unacceptable. It was true that Hope was a bit of a handful, and her curiosity was almost insatiable, but we were vampires. If we couldn't outpace a human child, something was lacking in the care that was being provided. Felix apologized on his way out, and I assured him that everything was fine on his way from the throne room. It was a few hours before our next audience, so we allowed ourselves to relax. Even without Felix's presence, jokes, laughter, and conversation filled the room. I allowed myself to leave my throne and curl up on Aro's lap while assuring Keys that the neglectful vampire would be chided by Felix. I sank into the feelings of happiness, family, and home that always existed when it was just the Volturi present. Aro. I was craving a weekend alone with my mate. I wouldn't insist on a week or a month, just a weekend. I wanted no interruptions, not even from our quirky, wonderful, and well-meaning family. I felt certain that I could convince Dmitri of Bella and my safety if he allowed us to leave the castle unaccompanied. But I wasn't feeling as confident about Jane. I may be king, but protection was Dmitri's responsibility, and Jane took to Bella with determination I didn't try to fully comprehend. I considered trying to sneak with Bella from the castle, but gave up before the idea was fully formed. Still, Bella had yet to visit Venice. It was truly beautiful there, but it was a different kind of beauty than existed elsewhere. Perhaps Alec would be willing to accompany Jane, and we could go as a foursome. When I decided that the solution would be a satisfactory compromise, I began my planning in earnest. I even scheduled a night at the theater. Twilight boat rides would be fabulous, so I scheduled those too. I even found a museum that offered interested parties the opportunity to watch books being restored. My excitement grew with every plan made, and I almost extended the trip to last longer, but Voltera was no longer stagnant in any way. Things changed for us now almost as often as they would have done in a human life. We might be missed on a longer expedition. Jane and Alec agreed to accompany us when I called them to my office, and Dmitri released them from their duties for the relevant weekend. The receptionist cleared our schedule, and everyone promised to let the trip be a surprise from my amazing mate. I did not anticipate her eavesdropping on my conversations. When she entered my office, sat in my lap, and kissed my neck, I knew I'd been caught. The details were still secret, though, so I closed my computer and settled in with my mate for a long night of lovemaking. Felix. With a castle full of guidance and more love than I ever anticipated, Hope grew into a fiery, opinionated, independent, precocious young woman. She could discuss most subjects with flair and maturity far beyond her years. She excelled in computers, loved reading, sang constantly, and had been allowed every opportunity and milestone it was possible to provide along the way. When the sun kept me in, Adam took his place as guide and guard. Nothing that didn't risk revealing the secret was denied her, so socializing with children her age was somewhat limited, but everything else she could want was provided. As she grew, both Bella and Angela agreed on the importance of Hope having responsibilities and chores, both around the house and around the castle. She never complained, and little rebellions were rare and quickly quashed. Unfortunately, everyone, even my little angel, was destined to become a teenager at some point. When Keys came to me and informed me that Hope had tried to kiss him during their art lessons, my head fell into my hands. Change was coming again, and I didn't think this one would be easy on Hope or Keys. It certainly wouldn't be easy on me. Art lessons became supervised affairs with someone who just felt the need to express themselves, and Keys willingly distanced himself from Hope as much as he could without causing them both pain and hurting her feelings. I saw Keys frequently watching from the shadows. I pitied and respected him at the same time. When he was a boy, 13 was a perfectly acceptable age to be married to a much older man. I never would have allowed it, even if I had to get beat up a few times standing in his way, but he didn't even attempt it. The women of the castle turned their regular girls' night into a class on puberty and sex education and framed it in a party atmosphere. I don't know how they did it, but I'm glad they did. Even though I was sure Keys would find a way to drain any poor kid Hope found to experiment with. She needed to understand the changes involved in becoming a woman. I watched Hope more closely these days. Rebellion was typical in the teenage years, and I was under no illusion that a lack of friends her age would prevent the behavior. Hope was almost through her 13th year when Dmitri approached Hope while she attempted to sneak from the castle. I was watching, but I let him handle it. Hope was almost to the human entrance when Dmitri asked, "Where are you off to, princess?" "I'm going to find your friend, Dmitri. She'll know the secret, eventually. I want a friend roughly my own age," Hope declared. Dmitri froze, but only for a second, and I knew my friend was fighting the urge to help Hope in her mission, but he behaved as responsibly as I knew he would. "While I'd love to meet her now, I'm afraid we have to postpone that trip just a couple more years," he declared. Then he did what I'd been too chicken to do and explained that the friend she'd seen was his soulmate. That one day he would love her very much, like Keys loved Hope. Hope broke down into sobs. "Keys doesn't want me," she declared. Dmitri embraced her through her tears and explained then I would have that Keys loved her very much but wanted to give her time to grow up all the way. Dmitri took her for a walk through the town while they discussed mates and how they usually meet when both are grown-ups. She seemed to understand, if not fully, at least enough for now, by the time he brought her back to the castle. I watched over them as Hope took folded paper from her back pocket. "If she's your soulmate, you want to know what she looks like, right?" I knew my girl had no clue what a gift she'd offered Dmitri, but I did. Dmitri took the paper gently and stared at it for only a moment before guiding Hope home. He even had her laughing at weird sci-fi movie jokes by the time they got there. Star Wars should be left in the past, except for the core 6 movies, in my opinion, but they were obsessed. When Hope was inside, Dmitri leaned against the door and studied the image of his mate with hungry intensity. Just a few more years was the best I had to offer Dmitri. Bella would skin us if there was another underage human girl in the castle, Dmitri admitted. The kings, too, but damn, that was tempting. I embraced my friend, my brother, and knew that there were no words of wisdom or kindness that would make the next few years easier for him. The only comfort I could take was that he no longer prayed before every mission for her not to be among the guilty. At least his mind had been given respite from that. Bella, I was walking to my favorite bookstore and to search for Hope, a 14th birthday present, when I caught 2 cents in the city that absolute Lee didn't belong there and 1 cent that shouldn't be out of the castle. I ran at speeds that would make our citizens see a blur at most and think the wind stirred. I was in a rage when I found Hope conversing calmly with both of the leaders of the Romanian coven. I knew Dmitri was preoccupied with the picture of his mate, but he was slipping if these two came into our city or even ventured close without him being aware. The Romanians were quickly placed in my shield, and I ordered Hope to fetch her father and Dmitri. She tried to argue, but at my command of, "Now, Hope," she ran back to the castle. I expected that was the first time someone had spoken sharply to her, but I'd deal with that later. Soon, Dmitri and Felix arrived at slightly more than human speed, leading a pack that included all of the elites and Aro'S and Marcus. Angela had no doubt stayed at the castle, comforting Hope. Felix searched the area and found the upper-level guard watching Hope. He'd been completely dismembered. So, this was a planned conversation with our charge. Hope had not even realized her always-present guard was in such a state. She would have been horrified. Marcus and Keys ordered me to lower my shield when they were ready to prevent the two from running. Stefan and Vladimir had no chance. They were led by the kings who were encircled by the elite back to the castle. A small, vindictive part of me wanted one or both vampires to attempt to flee so Jane could have an excuse to zap them. I did not get my wish. They seemed meek as lambs as they were being led to their imminent deaths. I knew it would be their deaths because if the kings didn't see to it, I would. Forget providing an acceptable excuse to the vampire world. They had threatened Angela. They had threatened me. Given the chance, they probably would have absconded with Hope. They had killed Diademe. They died today. Hope was being led home and guarded by half of the upper guard when we passed. Angela was with her, holding her hand. Despite experience, Angela had never grown accustomed to executions, and we all knew where this was heading and that Hope needed comforting. I was relieved when Heidi met the pie at the elevator and allowed myself to bring up the rear into the throne room. Unlike Angela, I needed to see this pair burn and had needed it, if only for Marcus's sake, since I was human. Everyone's face in the throne room was solemn except for Marcus's. He was smiling an evil smile that I would expect on Keys's face when an appropriate situation presented itself. "So, boys," I asked, addressing the condemned pair. "Did I take too long waiting for an excuse so you decided to seek death anyway?" You could have heard a pin drop in the room. No one was even breathing. "They are mine," Marcus declared. He was ready to challenge anyone, including me, for the ability to end the Romanians. I stepped back, but suggested, "Allow Aro to read them first. We need to know all their crimes and whether they told anyone about Hope." Jane came to my side and took my hand. We both knew this was about to get nasty. Both vampires voluntarily offered Aro their hands. I was ready with my shield, but it was wholly unnecessary. Still, when Vladimir was released, and Marcus lunged, I was ready just in case. Both of the Romanians were fighters. They moved like liquid lightning. I suspected all of the gifted Gs were ready with our gifts on the off chance that Vladimir got in a lucky swipe. I watched, overwhelmingly proud of Marcus's fighting and his ferocity as he tore Vladimir into tiny pieces. I had seen Marcus train, of course. Everyone had seen his recovery from mourning Diademe and back into the fierce warrior he had once been. Still, I worried about injury to my friend. My worry for all of them had been almost disabling in the beginning. Now that I knew I had the ability to offer protection, it wasn't quite as bad any longer. When Vladimir was a stump, I offered Marcus the lighter. Marcus handed it back to me, growling that the scum would burn together. I stepped back again, but watched Marcus so that he didn't let his rage completely overtake him to the point that he became feral. He ordered Stefan released, and I had the pleasure of Jane zapping him when he tried to run for it. I could understand his courage failing him a little after the completely merciless dismemberment of his brother. Marcus waited patiently for Stefan to recover and stand before he, too, was ripped into pieces. I thought we might need to collect with a broom before actually being able to light them on fire. I wondered oddly as I towed one of the pieces back to the center of the circle if the brain of either vampire could still feel the pain of all those pieces. To my surprise, Keys sat back to watch, seemingly content. I had expected him to demand a piece of the Romanians, too, after whatever they were trying to do to Hope. I knew Aro understood me enough to know that if I felt the need for justice of my own, I would take it myself. But becoming nothing but sand-like particles didn't seem painful enough for these two, and Marcus had suffered for millennia from their actions. Once the fight was over, the pieces burned, and the remains swept away, Marcus sat down on his throne. Diademe's death and the threats to Angela are avenged, he declared. I took his hand, because a few brief minutes of pain, no matter how intense, would never avenge the suffering he endured. He squeezed my hand as if he knew my thoughts, then released me. Dmitri looked like a broken man when he approached the thrones. I'm sorry. I made a grave error. It will never happen again. I can resign, Dmitri intoned. I didn't let him go further. I embraced him. It will never happen again. That is sufficient, I declared. You will not resign. We need you. Soon Felix joined the hug. We all make mistakes, man, was Felix's comfort. Jane joined in, and everyone followed while the kings watched on with wide smiles. They'd never gotten as good at the group hugging stuff as we had. They were improving, though. I smiled at my mate from my place among my friends and family. Dmitri, Charlie followed me as I escaped from the throne room. My friends and the king's and queen's reassurance that all would be well didn't completely soothe me. The hug had gone farther than the words had, but I had still failed miserably. D spent my time obsessing over the picture Hope had offered me and had only done the bare minimum required in my job. Somehow, looking into the eyes of that drawing had become more important than tracking our enemies. Hope had almost suffered for it. Hope was Keys's, and soon to be my queen. Charlie followed me to my office, but maintained his silence until I collapsed into my desk chair. His words, "It's a miserable feeling to fail those you love, isn't it?" barely registered with me. I nodded. Charlie explained to me how he'd failed Bella for years with his lack of realization that she required a parent. He explained that it took a catastrophic event in her life to wake him up and make him focus on his little girl. He went on to tell me that it took effort to identify all the places as doing things wrong and determination to make better choices in the future to identify all the changes he needed to make and enact them. You already know where you erred and what to do so this never happens again, Charlie comforted. You have served the Volturi for millennia. You were due for an error. I thanked Charlie for his brand of encouragement. It was the best advice I'd gotten. When Charlie left, I scanned all the covens I was responsible for watching. All were where they should be, all except for Esme. She was nowhere. I wondered if we had missed her death or if she had found a shield of some kind to protect her. I called a lower guard to check on Carile. I honestly didn't expect him to last long without even any companionship. I had expected the Cullens' extinction to take longer. Next, I checked on every single guard in the castle. I verified that they were all performing their duties and that they didn't require anything from me, the kings, or the queens. Everyone assured me that all was well and that nothing suspicious had been spotted. I even checked on our technological wizards to verify their needs were being met. It appeared that the only ball I had dropped badly was the location of the Romanians. That was a relief. Felix. After the close call with the Romanians, Hope became determined to assist my team. I didn't know if she was scared and had temporarily lost her drive to actively explore. If she was trying to appear more mature than she was, or if she just wanted to be closer to me. No matter the reason, I allowed it. We were far from the reception area, and she was safe. Though a guard stayed with her to personally guarantee it, even if she was within touching distance. She learned to find information on people, hack cell phones, create reports, and generally became part of the team during her time with us. We protected her from anything that might lead to danger, but still, my entire team was ready and willing to teach her every skill they'd acquired over the years. She ate up the information and the attention. I often wished there was a button that could slow down time. She was growing up so fast, but since there wasn't, I just enjoyed every possible moment with her. Only a few days after her 16th birthday, Hope pulled me to the side of the office. "Daddy, Dimitri's mate is sad. She's in college now in Paris. I want to help him find her. I need to help him find her." Her gift had grown consistently from when she was very little, and I admitted to myself that she was right. If the girl was unhappy, it was time, probably past time for her to be found. Still, There were permissions to seek and arrangements to be made. The throne room, when we entered, looked like a family gathering more than anything else. Hope hadn't met Ed here except for the one time she'd sought out Bella to explain the word beautiful to her. She'd been kept far away from justice and potential violence by family and guards. When I explained the situation and why we'd chosen now to approach, there was no careful debate over whether it was time to collect Dmitri's mate. That was a foregone conclusion. Instead, an argument sprang up on not who was going but who would be forced to stay home. Keys and Bella declared themselves both going. This guaranteed Jane would attend as well. Dmitri looked like he might be ready to break into song while the debate raged around him unnoticed. It took a full hour for decisions to be made. Bella led the way from the throne room. Jane, and Keys would serve as Hope's guard and would return with Hope after Dmitri's mate was located. Alec and Chelsea would remain behind with Dmitri. Unfortunately, with Dmitri gone from the castle, I couldn't join either team. I had to take over Dmitri's responsibilities in the castle. The only duty I was incapable of performing was tracking our enemies. Dmitri would have to see to that himself, even while wooing his mate. With the Romanian leaders vanquished, the threat there was dead, and I didn't anticipate real problems from any other quarter. Dmitri brought me up to speed on every mission and spy, then went to pack a suitcase. I assisted Hope in packing her flight bag for the first time. My baby was nearing adulthood, and I didn't want to let her go. I assured myself while securing the zipper that she would be well protected and cared for. And I did what all fathers have to do eventually and let her go. The team loaded into 2 SUVs. In a completely outrageous moment of overprotectiveness, I ordered some upper guards to move on foot and sweep the city clean of vampires before Hope's arrival. Heidi joined me to watch Hope disappear into the twilight on her first mission. She squeezed my hand and reassured me that everyone would be okay and return to us safely. I got back to work, stuck between wishing Dmitri well and wanting Hope back at the castle. Bella, I drove the SUV to Paris. Dmitri was in no state to drive anywhere, so I took the task myself. While we were on the roads, I reminded Dmitri unnecessarily about modern women and our need to make our own decisions. Dmitri was current in his values and beliefs. He would respect his mate, whoever she was. I was so excited on his behalf. He'd waited so long. Sorbonne University was fairly easy to locate. We found a suite nearby that was large enough to accommodate all of us. Dmitri was begging not to wait another minute, so we ventured out into the night. We found her, still studying, at the university library. She was beautiful and looked quite focused on her work, though Hope was right. She did appear sad. Dmitri found a book from the many on the shelves and sat near her. Hope's task had been incredibly easy, now Dmitri had the challenge of convincing her to return with him. I walked behind Keys and Hope as we made our way back to the suite. They shared sweet words I pretended not to hear. Hope even confessed, "I wish it were already time for us." Keys didn't reassure her verbally but did allow himself to take her hand for the first time. When Hope was in bed, Keys confessed, "This endless waiting is a special sort of hell." My mind blanked on encouraging words. The only hope I felt right in offering was, "You are never alone." Keys embraced me. It was rare that he initiated physical affection, but it did happen on occasion now. "You've made sure of it, all these years," Keys said. I just hugged him more tightly. Keys, Jane, and I eventually settled into a conversation about events upcoming at the castle. We passed the time until Hope woke. It was as calming just to sit and converse with friends about the little nothings that were really everything to us. The 4 of us walked around the city a bit, made sure Hope had a filling breakfast, even if she proclaimed it not quite up to our chef's standard, and picked up small souvenirs for Felix and Heidi. Hope slid into the car with a smile on her face. I wondered if she realized what a truly amazing gift she'd given Dmitri. But when I looked back and saw her hand clasped tightly in Keys's, I knew she understood. The trip back to the castle was long, and Hope fell asleep on Keys's shoulder. I knew the contact, and not being able to have more of it, brought Keys both pleasure and pain. Still, Jane and I ignored the situation and talked about Dmitri's mate. She was quite beautiful. I hoped that she would accept Dmitri quickly. I would miss my brother around the castle, but his current task was the most important in his very long life. I would make sure he was aware that I'd be air for him as fast as the plane could bring me if he needed me. When Voltera was in sight, my excitement to see Aro'S grew. Separation, even when necessary, was never easy. Had I been a different type of queen, It might not have ever been a requirement, but my shield was invaluable, especially to protect a human in our midst, and I felt an intrinsic need to protect my family that Aro would never ask me to suppress. Aro was waiting with Felix and Heidi when we parked. Hope slid from the car and threw herself in Felix's arms with a happy, "Daddy, I did it. I found her." I went into Aro's embrace happily. And we made our way to our home to make love and reconnect until we were called to duty again. Bella. Dmitri was absent from the castle for more than 6 months. The castle seemed off without him around. And it wasn't because his work wasn't getting done. It was. Felix oversaw everything impeccably except for tracking the covens that might cause trouble. I tried to ignore the wrongness in the castle, but eagerly accepted Dmitri's nightly call. Felix assured me he was kept updated every night, too. Sometimes he called for dating advice. Sometimes he called to update me on his progress with his mate. Sometimes he just called to talk. I made it 3 months before I insisted to Aro that Paris was positively perfect this time of year, and I was desperately in need of a weekend away. Aro saw through me, but maybe he was missing Dmitri, too, because he didn't comment. I admit I spied a little bit. We were in town after all, and it would be foolish not to check in. We even visited Dmitri at the little apartment he'd rented on a month-to-month basis. How he'd found a month-to-month lease was beyond me, but if it needed doing, somehow Dmitri always got it done. Sora had changed him. Dmitri greeted us both with bone-crushing hugs when we turned up unannounced on his doorstep in the middle of the night. "What took you so long to show yourselves?" Dmitri asked. Aro chuckled, and the laughter spread. Soon, we were touring Dmitri's temporary home, and he was filling us in on every detail of Sora he could think of. He admitted guiltily that things were progressing slowly. Sora's mother and father loved her and each other very much, and Sora had 2 younger sisters she also adored. He had no clue how to convince her to be willing to leave them. We assured him that although he was missed, there was no need to rush. However, he might expect more visitors the longer he was away. After a night spent talking just the 3 of us, I felt better. I was able to return to Voltera and spread the word that Dmitri was genuinely happy out in the world. That seemed to provide a balm to everyone. We waited for any news eagerly, and at 6.5 months it came. Dmitri had proposed. Sora agreed to the wedding, the return to Voltera, and accepted the inevitability of the change. Dmitri had explained our world to her, and she accepted her new reality without much shock. Explaining that she'd always known he'd been different. Sora wanted her parents' last memory of her to be her wedding. She needed them to know how happy she was. She asked Dmitri if pretending to be human for one event would be too onerous for us. We started researching churches and cathedrals all over Europe, just in case the information might prove handy, and assured Dmitri that one day of NTACTS and slow movements wasn't too much to request. We all gathered in the throne room for their return. It had been a struggle for all of us not to gather in the garage or the elevator, but I insisted that it might appear frightening to Sora. So, we maintained our decorum and waited for them like the ancient vampires most of us were. I almost reasoned myself into leaving the group and letting Angela and Hope accompany me. We were still young enough to have the excuse of impatience after all. It got harder when Hope asked, but although declining was difficult, I managed it. I was glad our family would once more be complete. And when we all heard the elevator door open, everyone went silent and still in their nervousness. I encouraged my family to act naturally. I was as nervous as any of them. But this poor human girl needed to feel comfortable with us. No matter how at ease she seemed with everything, learning that vampires existed had to be a shock. I stood from my throne when the doors opened. Still, I was proud of myself. I waited till Dmitri and Sora stood in front of us before rushing to hug either of them. I chose to embrace Sora first. I wanted her to feel welcome and wanted in her new home. "Welcome to the family," was all I said. Her blush was adorable, but her quiet, "thank you," was confident and unafraid. I pulled Dmitri into a tight embrace. "Thank you, little sister," he whispered in my ear. Everyone moved at a human pace and was careful not to crowd Sora, but I heard a shopping trip being planned before introductions were complete. Everyone knew better than to invite me. A lot had changed since I'd been human, but not my dislike of shopping. Heidi and Chelsea teased me about it regularly. Jane and I nodded to each other. That was all it took. We'd both introduce Sora to Layla within the coming days. As they exited the throne room, prompted by Sora's request for food, Felix reassured Dmitri that everything was being seen to and that there were no threats on the horizon. When everyone was back to seeing to their duties, Aro declared, "And so we change once again." I kissed him deeply, and he carried me home as if I were still a human. We made love as if it were the very first time all over again and didn't separate until only minutes before we were due in court. Angela, Sora fit in with us, even as a human, from the very beginning. While I had been terrified of vampires that weren't Marcus in the beginning, Sora allowed herself to get to know who we were instead of focusing on differences in species. Hope and Sora became thick as thieves very quickly. The only way an outsider would be able to really tell Sora hadn't been with us all along was Marcus educating her on the vampire world. Marcus took immense pleasure in this, and I enjoyed sitting and watching him explain our world while Sora asked pointed and educated questions. Sora had asked us if we would mind very much attending her wedding in Paris, so her parents wouldn't need to travel. We agreed easily and started planning. Layla was given the honor of designing a marvelous ball gown for Sora. The two women were constantly collaborating, and it was wonderful to see. For me, I wish Lexi had been allowed to be part of the design, but though the pair got along wonderfully, their sense of style didn't mesh at all. Sora wanted everything classic and traditional and a bit sparkly. Lexi could assist with those plans, but hadn't learned how to design them herself yet. Classic just didn't come naturally to her. Dmitri had asked Bella and Felix both to be on his side of the aisle. Including Bella in such a way was a little non-traditional, but Sora approved, and it was important to Dmitri. Sora's sisters would serve as her bridesmaids, so although Layla offered to go to Paris and provide custom clothing for every member of the wedding party, Sora decided to do things the way her family would understand and make a full day of dress shopping in Paris. We had a marvelous time choosing dresses that suited us. Sora chose the color the bridesmaids' dresses would be, but not the style, so that her mother, her sisters, and Bella could all choose something individual that flattered them and their sense of style. The plum color she paired with silver flattered everyone wonderfully. We all got dresses in the appropriate shade so we fit the colors of the wedding. Heidi was absolutely stunning in a floor-length plum gown that was somewhat Grecian style. I was getting so eager for the wedding. Dmitri, the joy of knowing my mate, of holding her, providing for her, and watching over her while she slept was unexplainable. I felt a little guilty that Felix was still seeing to my duties for me, but the guilt couldn't touch me all that much in the midst of all the joy. Bella and Aro had been the most powerful mating bond I'd ever seen formed with my own eyes. They'd both been broken in their own ways, and it had been almost possible to see the healing that had occurred. I respected Marcus even more now for being willing to deny himself this kind of joy when Angela was having doubts. I was lucky beyond all reason that my Sora was almost as happy as I was. When I encouraged Sora that money was no object and that she could plan the wedding that little girls dream of, she took me at my word. The wedding party might be small, but there would be more than 300 guests in attendance. Members of the lower and upper guards would also be present in almost every role, even dressed casually about the city, watching for an inkling of trouble. The security would be invisible to the human eye. But all of the royals would be in attendance, as well as Sora and Hope. Somehow, I suspected a little hacking by Felix. Notre Dame was available for our wedding day. The chef had even offered, with the help of human staff, to cater the wedding. Remembering how Bella had raved about his food, I accepted. A human photographer and videographer had been hired. I wanted Angela to attend as a guest, not as part of the party staff, though she offered. Marcus smiled and winked at me, so I knew he approved of having his mate at his side during the festivities. There as only one small hiccup in the whole planning of the event. Vampires don't eat, and the humans would expect and likely need food at the reception. With the help of the chef, Sora, and Bella, we ate a menu of finger foods that Sora declared were so tasty no one would realize a formal dinner wasn't happening for sheer bliss. Champagne would be available, so the vampires wouldn't be socializing with their hands empty. A DJ was found and quickly hired to provide music through the evening, and Corin agreed to play for us during the wedding. It was going flawlessly. Sora chose a beautiful paper, accented with pressed flowers for our wedding invitations, and the royal calligrapher seemed overjoyed to be able to play his part in the planning of my wedding. He even seemed happy about the very long list of invitees that did not reside in the castle. It all went so smoothly that I kept waiting for a hiccup or an error or even an emergency of some sort to spill some shadow on our joy. To my relief, nothing happened. The only potential shadow on the day was the plane crash that would occur on our way to our honeymoon. One of the Volturi planes, luckily one that was nearing the end of its lifespan, would be sacrificed for this cause a few days after the wedding. It would meet its end in the ocean, so no lives would be risked. Practically every male in the castle insisted that a bachelor. Our party was an absolute necessity since I was only getting married once in an eternity. I completely refused a strip club. I would never disrespect my wife like that. So we decided that a boys' night, followed by a hunt, would be just the thing. Felix planned it. I heard Bella helping the ladies at a bachelorette party, but they had to figure out a way to include the human members of the bridal party, so I had no idea what they would do. I didn't worry about that particular challenge much. Instead, I focused on the fact that Sora, my beautiful Sora that I'd been waiting on since I first understood that vampires didn't have to walk the world alone, was actually here and in my life, and I was about to marry her. Felix. Privacy really is an illusion in Voltera, so when I heard Hope and Sora discussing Sora's upcoming wedding and Hope admitting how much she'd like something similar after she was a vampire already, I didn't hesitate to clue keys in. I wanted my baby girl to have every experience she wanted, and what was done with the information would ultimately be up to Keys. I was now very familiar with the human world, but the human custom of marriage didn't seem as rich to me as a vampire bonding. I knew Bella would have been horrified to experience a human marriage where she would be the center of everyone's attention for the entire night, but our queen was quirky like that. Still, Angela hadn't hinted at wanting one either, and unlike Bella, Angela's parents had a successful marriage and raised her with the idea that being married was the only acceptable way to announce one's commitment to being together permanently. It ultimately didn't matter what value I saw in the human custom. Hope wanted it, and if I were placing bets, I'd put all my money on Keys managing to come through in a spectacular way. Hope grew more mature by the day. Helping Sora had sped things along considerably, and I couldn't expect Keys to wait for his mate past the magic number of her 18th birthday. If she didn't need him as much as he needed her, I might have attempted convincing him to wait just a little bit longer, though. Hope had completed all the requirements to graduate high school while Dmitri was with Sora. So she didn't even have to worry about textbooks anymore. Though I found her in the archives studying the intricacies of the vampire world quite often. She even helped me with the computer side of things and was becoming quite a little programmer in her own right. I had asked Bella and Angela once if they might start teaching her what it was like to be queen. They calmly and gently pointed out that it wasn't something that could be taught. Bella's style of things wasn't anything like Angela's, and when it came time for Hope to sit on one of the thrones, Hope's style of ruling likely wouldn't resemble either of our current queens. Hope would have the added responsibility of her gift, and just like Angela's healing gift influenced how she interacted with visitors, Hope's would as well. I admitted to myself that I was being silly because I knew this already. I just didn't want to allow Hope into a situation where she might feel uncomfortable or unprepared. Angela and Bella both promised that if they saw her floundering, they would step in and help in every way they could think of. Although I'd known they would, their promise reassured me. Tri came by to check on the state of the vampire world quite frequently, and Sora began accompanying him on the visits. She was going to be a wonderful match for him as a vampire. She already read spy reports over his shoulder, asking for more details about the covens in question. I knew she'd have to prove herself through time before joint leadership was given to them, but I could already imagine it happening. When the time came, I would support the decision and assist the couple in any way I could. When the time arrived for the celebrations in France to begin, every one of our planes was both full and in use. Security mostly drove, so many of our cars were full as well. I had checked very thoroughly for any threat, even a small, emerging one, but none existed. Crime had gone silent in our world after the Romanian leader's death. Things were happening so fast, but our security at home was still strong, and I was confident that all events would go without a hitch. If anything dared happen, I'd see it smoothed out long before it interrupted anyone's plans. Dmitri. I was driven, blindfolded, through Paris. I wasn't sure if this was a custom I hadn't heard of before or if my staff were having a little fun at my expense. Either way, I was surprisingly eager to see what my friends and family had planned for my evening. I was surprised when we arrived at a mock casino. They had rented a hall, and upon entering, we were met with a charismatic man in a suit counting out $10,000 of chips for each person entering the party. He explained that any betting over the $10,000 mark would have to come from our personal piggy banks. When we were all seated, card dealers and waitresses wearing the equivalent of something one might to a dance club all entered. The whiskey was the good stuff. I could tell from the smell, but there was also a selection of wine on offer for me and anyone else with my preferences. I'd never been a fan of whiskey. Soon, everyone had their drinks, their chips, and were ready to play. I heard mutters of, "Just how rich are they?" between our human guests. We were a bit over the top tonight, even I had to admit. If I had to guess, I'd bet on Aro'S or Felix funding the festivities. Poker and blackjack were the main games on offer. We filled the room quite well, and the competition was good, even if the vampires in the room occasionally threw the game so our human guests would leave with winnings. I stuck with poker, and Sora's father was beside me most of the night. Between two very close hands, Sora's father admitted, "I don't even know what you do for work, son, to allow you to provide this kind of experience for us on top of such a spectacular wedding for my daughter." "I have a supervisory role in a security company," I offered. It was the closest to the truth I could possibly give him. "I've been there a while, it is a stable position, and it is quite lucrative." "You will care for my baby girl always?" he asked. "She will have her every need met. Every day of forever, sir," I promised. "We are something of a family. She will never want for anything." "Good, good," he muttered. Glasses were refilled, and the music level was raised just a little. The songs were highly varied, but everyone seemed to be having a fabulous time. Aro'S watched on as if he were waiting to be needed to step in or redirect attention at a moment's notice. Felix seemed equally aware and ensured everyone had a good time. When funds became depleted toward the end of the evening, cigars were passed around, and dancers appeared. They did not strip, but they performed. The cigar was enjoyable, but the only woman I wanted dancing before me in any state of dress or undress was my Sora. After the humans were chauffeured home by lower guards in SUVs, vampires ventured out into the city for a celebratory hunt. Some of us even ventured to the suburbs. Crime was a very dangerous occupation for the criminal anywhere near Paris tonight. It had been a fabulous evening. I couldn't have planned better myself, even if I'd tried. I wondered what the queens had planned for Sora's evening. I hope she was having just as much fun. Bella, we might have gone a bit overboard on Sora's Bachelorette celebration. Like Dmitri, Sora rejected the traditional idea of drinks and strippers. So I'd called Heidi for help, and we lucked into what I hoped would be a wonderful experience for Sora and her human guests. We'd found a spa that was owned and operated by vampires on the outskirts of Paris. It was a bit of a drive, but I was confident it would be worth it. We reserved the location and every employee for the evening. Everything from facials, massages, and haircuts was on offer. If we'd been feeling more adventurous, we could have gotten our hair dyed, but I didn't think anyone would. Heidi explained that this was where the two wonderful women who had provided massages for Angela and me had come from. They regularly provided services for humans, or at least humans who could afford them. So everyone was in good hands. We were plied with drinks regularly and primped in every possible way. We took turns getting some of the most wonderful massages of our lives. We made sure the humans were allowed to go first. Music was available everywhere in the spa, and Heidi had even provided monogrammed robes and slippers for each of us. Hope and Sora both got their hair trimmed and some sort of treatment done to it that made it impossibly shiny. Everyone was treated to lovely plum-colored manicures, all except for Sora, whose nails were done in metallic silver. Feet were soaked, and toenails pedicured as well. I watched closely, assuring Sora, Hope, and our human guests were all chatting easily and enjoying themselves. At least I was until it was my turn for a massage. I left Heidi in charge of coordinating the party while I spent a wonderfully enjoyable hour on the massage table. Sora's sisters followed her led toward the end of the night, adding whatever treatment Sora had done on her hair. Angela went everywhere but the massage rooms, occasionally taking pictures and documenting the evening for Sora and her family. I heard occasional mutters of how can he afford this kind of luxury, but no one actually asked Sora directly, so we pretended not to hear. The hair stylists assured us all that they would be available before the ceremony at the end of the evening. When everyone was chauffeured home and Hope and Sora were asleep for the night, all the vampires ventured out into the night to complete the festivities with a hunt. I opted to stay behind. There were guards everywhere, I was sure. Still, Hope and Sora were human. Dmitri and Keys both trusted me with their most important treasures. I would not let them out of my hearing before we were all safe in the castle. I'd had a wonderful evening, and Sora had been absolutely thrilled with every experience. I settled in to protect my charges, but I entertained myself with own vampire fiction I'd brought with me while I waited. Heidi made sure that Sora and Hope both awoke with pain reliever and water on their bedside tables. Breakfast was delivered, courtesy of our chef, though I don't know how he did it. Before they were out of the shower. Once she finished breakfast, Sora proclaimed, "I'm getting married today." In the happiest tone I could imagine. We all smiled. After showers, our hairstylists appeared and prepared us all for the day. Makeup was carefully applied, and after Sora's mother and sisters arrived, the dress was brought out. Had I, even for a moment, been one of those girls who wanted to get married, this dress would have surpassed my wildest dreams. It was beaded, sparkly, fitted at the bodice, and once it was on Sora, I had to admit she looked like a princess. Heidi presented Sora with jewelry, assuring her that they were from Dmitri. Her mother helped her put on the necklace and earrings. Even Sora's shoes were perfect. They were silver fabric and bead encrusted. The sisters examined the gown with care, making sure not to damage anything. Once everyone was dressed and ready, we made our way to the cathedral. Limousines were provided to transport everyone. I stepped in with the wedding party, equally excited for Sora, overwhelmed by her happiness, and relieved Aro knew me in ways no one else ever would and hadn't even asked me to do this. Despite his love of a show, he considered my comfort in everything. Jane was in the next limousine back. I knew she would never let me venture into even well-guarded territory without her close. We'd become so aware of each other over the years that I could almost feel her eyes watching. Everyone separated to their appropriate places when we arrived at Notre Dame. Dmitri questioned Miku, ite thoroughly on the events of our night, how Sora had slept, and her mood this morning. The ever-composed Dmitri was obviously nervous. I offered every support and comfort I was capable of, including a tight hug. Dmitri seemed to settle a bit. Everything was ready. Everything was perfect, and I was very eager to see my big brother say, "I do." Aro, I found the custom of human weddings and all the planning that was involved absolutely wonderfully fascinating. I sat in my front row seat on the groom's side of the wedding, listening to Corin's magnificent piano work, relieved in the fact that I could observe. I knew no one would believe me if I admitted it, but I was relieved my part in this perfect-seeming day was limited to watching and observations. My Bella, with Felix and Dmitri, walked down the aisle together to get into their places. Bella pulled Dmitri into a tight hug at the last minute. "I wish you an eternity of joy and happiness, even exceeding my own, brother," she whispered. If one sentence could explain my mate plainly, that was it. She wanted her family and friends, down to the very last lower guard, to experience joy that matched or exceeded her own. If it were in her power, she'd make it happen. Since Hope's gift wasn't hers, she'd make sure we were a family and a tight-knit one, and that no one felt alone. In that moment, I was drawn back into the past. Bella was standing before me, human, asking what had happened to her. So much had happened since then. So much had changed. Before that day, we'd depended on Chelsea to bring us together with her gift. Bella had taught us a new way. A better way filled with laughter, love, genuine appreciation, and acceptance. I remembered her marching into the throne room, notebook in hand, insisting we all eat. All tea. Memories spooled out of every day that followed, and I found myself extraordinarily grateful for the fact that I could remember each one. I was even more grateful that there were an eternity more of them ahead of us. I pulled myself from my memories and observed Dmitri. He stood at the head of the aisle, waiting patiently for his mate to become his forever. The emotions on his face looked complex. Hope was there along with nervousness and a longing so strong that it looked like it might be painful. I was prouder of him in that moment than I had been all those years ago when he'd chosen to leave Amen and join us. The piano began playing a bit louder, and everyone stood to witness Sora's walk down the aisle. Her sisters preceded her, and they were radiant, though young. The plum-colored had been chosen for the wedding suited them both. Sora looked gloriously happy when I spotted her at the head of the aisle. My heart leapt for Dmitri. He'd finally found an equal, a partner, and his perfect match. Dmitri. I had to control myself as Sora walked toward me so that I didn't join her halfway up the aisle and escort her the rest of the way myself. Sora's eyes were on mine the entire way. When her father gave me her hand, I could have wept and shouted in joy. It was a moment I would always remember. The ceremony sped by at lightning speed. All too soon, I was slipping a ring onto Sora's hand and saying, "I do." The kiss was not our first by any means, but it felt like a new beginning in a history of wonderful beginnings. After we glided down the aisle and had a session with the photographer, it was time for the reception. The room was perfection when we entered, and the cheers from vampire and human alike, no doubt, echoed out into the city. The flowers were perfect here too, and the cake was huge. Sora, Bella, and Heidi had thought of every single detail. I was so happy that I felt overwhelmed. We spoke to every guest present, drank endless toasts to a life of happiness, and even fed each other tiny pieces of cake. Bella danced with me while Sora danced with her father. As the evening progressed and the humans seemed to find the chef's food as tasty as Sora promised, Aro approached. I don't want you to have to wait till it is safe to have 2 newborns, yet again, in the castle, he confided. You deserve to seal the bond tonight instead of having to wait. So we prepared the cabin in the Alps for you. It is well guarded by the upper guards and is a perfectly safe place for Sora to join you in immortality. Felix has agreed to assume your duties as well as his OWN for the next year so you can experience everything a honeymoon should offer. Aro looked nervous at his offer. I hugged him with all the joy in me and accepted gratefully. I had been dreading having to wait to seal our bond till Hope was also ready for the change. I should have known that my family would make things simple for me. I'm proud of you, my son, Aro proclaimed. Then he was once again blending in with the guests. When the night was over, part of me wanted to experience it all again. I didn't want to let this day end. The rest of me was eager for what came next. I kissed Sora Passio, Natalie when it was time to leave and we made our escape out into the night. On the plane, Sora curled into my embrace like she'd been there for centuries instead of months. Everything was perfect, Dmitri. Thank you, she mumbled sleepily. Thank you, my love, I murmured in her ear. The next year was going to be the beginning of a marvelous adventure. Bella, I thought that the wedding had been everything Sora wanted. So I was satisfied as I boarded the plane to return home to Voltera. This event was a success, and I was so happy that Dmitri would be able to seal his bond and claim his mate now, instead of having to wait for Hope to be ready too. It had been a lovely event, and I couldn't think of one thing that had been out of place or one moment that hadn't proceeded smoothly. I was smiling widely as I joined Aro. Instead of sitting beside him, I curled into his lap, kissing his throat as I had when I was human. I had reminisced a great deal about my first moments with Aro today, meeting his gaze, and the wonderful words. You healed me too, that had made me feel like his equal even in my humanity. Hope had danced beautifully with Keys at the wedding. They were going to make a wonderful pair. And she would excel at being queen. I was sure. The joy among the Volturi grew brighter every year. That my small contributions helped fill me with pride. Jane was chattering on about how beautiful the wedding had been to Chelsea. I reached over and took Jane's hand in mine. Jane stopped talking for a moment, squeezed my hand, then continued her conversation. All the elites were buzzing about the beauty and success of the day. It was a wonderful flight and I let myself drift into a state of profound relaxation as our plane cut through the night. Keys. I felt strangely ill at ease as our parade of SUVs approached the castle. I didn't see the guards in their places around the perimeter. It was true, they could be blending into the shadows in a way usually only Jane and Dmitri could do, but I doubted it. I expressed my concerns, and Bella's shield covered us all. I spoke frankly with Bella, explaining that no matter what was in there, we needed to be able to fight it, and her shield contracted. Bella had always responded best to frank speech when danger was imminent, but I was overwhelmingly proud when her shield settled only around Angela and Hope. I'd expected that she would insist on Jane being shielded, too. But she didn't. We took the stairs up from the garage instead of the elevator in an attempt to surprise whoever might be inside. I admitted, only to myself, at having no queens or kings in attendance in the castle had been a mistake. Even with no known threats on the horizon, there was always a risk. We'd all wanted to be a part of Dimitri's joy and had made a careless decision. Marcus, Aro, and I took the lead with Bella and Jane behind us. The elite guard would encircle us on the first opportunity, but if someone had invaded our home, it was our task to lead the charge. A full army awaited our arrival in front of the elevator when I opened the door to ground level. Few noticed our entrance from the stairs, and that gave us an advantage in the first few chaotic minutes. I recognized several different covens in attendance. Had I not been so angry and set on destruction, I would have wondered who managed to unite them against us while staying off our radar. Still, there were heads to remove. I would face the leader of this band of misfits when it was time. It almost distracted me the way enemies were disintegrated into sand-like particles wherever Bella's gaze fell. We worked as a well-oiled machine, tearing our enemies apart, and Bella practically making them disappear. Hope and Angela watched with horror from the door as multiple opponents rushed each of us. I heard Felix's chuckle a few times when enemies got close. He had stationed himself on the other side of Bella. All but Bella had been bitten before the force that had been waiting. The throne room next, I commanded. We moved as one. At the doors, Emmett waited with a face full of distress. It's Esme, he declared. I don't know if she thinks I'm loyal or thinks you will kill me. But she found a shield child and changed it. It's been keeping Dmitri from seeing her while she gathered enemies, I think. Let me fight. Guard Hope and Angela and kill anything that approaches them, I ordered. Emmett stood at attention and took his place protecting our innocence. I threw open the doors and was greeted by another army. The initial charge was stopped by Bella. She encased the front rows in her shield and turned them to sand in a show of power I had thought beyond her. Soon, we were surrounded on every side. It took roughly 30 minutes to get to the point that there were only a few stragglers left. They tried to run. They, too, were caught in Bella's shield. Cleaning up this mess was going to be hell, I thought with mild amusement. Esme stumbled from the corner of the room with her immortal shield child in her arms. She fell to her knees, not before me or Aro, but in front of Bella. I just wanted my life back, she begged. Give me my life back. It must be an Zing shock to the system to be forced to accept the consequences of your own actions once in your immortal life, Bella said. The expression on Bella's face was so full of emotions I couldn't identify them. I gave you your life. Which is more than you deserved. Thousands of our kind live as nomads. The only thing I took away was your view of your own superiority. Felix moved forward to dispose of them to end the standoff. But Bella's voice, though quiet, carried. They are mine, brother. A circle formed around Esme and the poor immortal child. Bella stepped forward, but was momentarily stopped by the child's shield. Bella smiled an oddly gentle smile and pushed through. I didn't know if Bella's superior shield permitted it, her obvious determination, or if the child was overtired from the fight. Perhaps it was a combination of reasons, along with the animal diet Esme had forced the child to maintain. Had your loyalty to each other been more than skin deep, you would have been able to rebuild at the end of your sentence. You know, Bella said gently. But loyalty for the Cullens was always a matter of convenience, not a true state of being, or you would have never abandoned me with immortal enemies intent on my death. I believed it, you know. Your perfect mother act convinced me. Helping you in the kitchen, preparing food for me or for the soup kitchens, were some of the fondest memories of my life before I came to Voltera. I loved you more than I loved my own mother. I wanted nothing more than to be part of your family, despite Edward's controlling nature. Esme flinched visibly and Bella's voice hardened. However, you abandoned me to die. You refused to accept your sentence, and you brought war to my home. I'm not the forgiving girl I once was. Bella collapsed her shield around the child, and it disintegrated from Esme's arms. Esme's cry echoed through the castle. You will serve every day of your sentence as a head existing in our jails. Only when that time has passed will I allow you to be destroyed. Bella declared. No, Esme cried. Bella reached out firmly and removed her head. She handed the head to Chelsea, and our procession made its way to the jails. No place was safe right now. Enemies could be around any corner. I was surprised and relieved to find at least some of the guards we'd left behind stuffed into the cells. More enemy combatants guarded them. All of our patience was running low. I wanted my castle back and to be able to comfort my mate. She was in the back with Angela, and by the look on her face, was completely horrified. Bella shielded the enemy guards and disintegrated them. Her anger seemed to increase consistently. I was worried for her and hoped Aro could help her calm down once this danger had passed. The elites opened the cells, freeing our guards. I couldn't tell if they were all present or not, but I hoped they were. We'd become close. A team, a family. It would have hurt if any had perished. Once the cells were empty, Bella took Esme's head from Chelsea and placed it in the center of one of the cells. We all watched her with an incredulous gaze. She really intended to see Esme serve every day of her sentence as a head. She wiped her hands as if removing dust, then ran to Aro and collapsed in his embrace. I ordered each of the elite to lead a team to scour the castle for enemies. They were to destroy all bodies completely as they went. We made our way back to the throne room. It was the most secure place to wait out the final moments of this threat. I didn't expect the guards to run into any more problems, but we had to make sure. Once we were safe inside, I told Bella she could release Angela and Hope. Emmett began the task of burning enemies, and after her shields fell, Bella assisted. Aro joined in, but I was comforting Hope, who'd been spared the sight of violence up to this point in her life, and Marcus comforted Angela, who was more traumatized by the death of the child than the army. Heidi asked permission to seek food for all of us, but Bella asked her to wait until we were assured the castle was entirely clear. While Heidi waited, she swept up dust and ashes, lighting the resulting mound on fire. Dawn was breaking when we were assured of the castle's safety, and Felix claimed Hope from where I'd been holding her on my lap. Aro. When all was said and done, we only lost 3 guards in the siege on our home. One of them was Cassandra, the girl who had escaped the southern wars and found sanctuary with us. Bella seemed to mourn her loss the most of the 3. She had been pressed into Esser. Vice teaching Bella to fight at one time, it seemed. We all agreed not to disturb Dmitri's honeymoon with any mention of what we arrived home to. Hope seemed to feel the most guilty about withholding the information, but she agreed it was best to hold her silence. After the castle was completely cleaned, searched for listening devices, and the few areas that had been damaged in the battle restored to their former beauty, all who were not on duty gathered in the throne room for a debriefing of sorts. We functioned as one team, each telling the others the duties performed and tasks completed to secure the castle. We walked somewhat softly around Hope and Angela. Hope had been most traumatized by what she'd seen. Felix and Keys had a long talk with her about justice and what that could mean, all the while admitting that what we'd walked into upon our return to the castle had been wholly unexpected and future security measures would make it unrepeatable. Our enemies seemed to be vanquished in the attempt to secure the castle. Felix was working on seeing if a single member from the troublesome covens among us remained. Initial results revealed that our enemies had seen to their own extinction. Emmett was promoted to an upper guard and given the accompanying larger quarters and salary. Bella said he'd earned it in his willingness to confront Esme and see to Hope and Angela's safety. He was switched to the upper guard training classes, and every report I saw said that he was excelling. Dmitri, I had changed Sora the first time we made love on our wedding night, just as she requested. I checked the news to verify the plane crash had gone off with no problems, and most of me was 100% sure that I was exactly where I should be and everything had gone totally without issue. However, I hadn't received a call from Bella or Felix. I tried to put it down to the fact that I was on my honeymoon and they had no idea when Sora was scheduled to be changed, but this was wholly unlike either of them. Bella especially. Our queen had sought me out in Paris to verify my safety while I was courting Sora, despite my daily calls. I knew I'd be too busy to check in once Sora woke to the world. So I decided to comfort Sora with my touch and check in at the castle. Odd behavior from my friends usually meant something was up. I called Bella first instead of Felix because, as a queen, she wouldn't have to seek permission to reveal any details taking place in the castle. Bella's voice was oddly guarded when she picked up the phone. Something had gone wrong. I was sure of it now. And they were trying to spare me worry. After my tales of travel and romance, Bella even attempted to end our conversation. Worry lodged itself in my stomach. Is anyone dead? I asked. Like a dam bursting. Bella told me of Esme's attempted siege of Voltera and the loss of 2 lower guards and 1 upper who had fought so hard they'd been killed instead of just herded below and secured in cells and made helpless. How many enemies were there? I asked plainly. We don't think a single member from any rival coven still exists, she admitted quietly. She told me about the battle and Esme's fate. I was shocked that she didn't put Esme out of all of our misery, but she explained her reasoning, and it was sound. She told me of repairs and everything that had been done to secure our home. IED to convince her to call home some of the upper-level guards that were here protecting me, but she flat out refused. She promised me that everything was safe and secure and that Hope and Angela were both completely fine, if a bit shaken. I made her swear to me that she wouldn't keep details like this from me again, and she did. She may be queen, but she was also my little sister. I felt both better and worse when the call ended. They'd been in so much danger, but everyone who posed a risk was now dead due to Esme's efforts. I wondered how she'd identified the child as a shield but gave up Why pondering in favor of reassuring Sora that she was doing well and that there was no one left, seemingly on the planet, who could pose a risk to us. I comforted her through every stage of the change. I managed to keep my cool when a few of the guards posted to watch over us came to drop off Sora's first meal, assuring me there should be enough for me to feed as well. The burn was growing, so, though I felt guilty, I took one from the assembled criminals. Sora did not wake gently. She woke with a snarl and fed voraciously on the men provided. Then she jumped through a closed window, shattering the glass, and ran out into the night. I found myself grateful that we were in the Alps and not in Voltera if my mate was going to try to run wild. I followed her closely and could hear several guards doing the same, watching my back. This just might be a long year. Carile. I felt Esme's bond with me when it re-engaged. It was strained and damaged. I could feel her pain through the bond, along with a growing edge of insanity. And wondered just what she'd done. I traveled all the way back to the ocean in the direction of the pull and stopped just feet before the water. I knew Esme had done so. Nothing horrible when she didn't come back from feeding and could tell from the pull and direction of the bond that she was far beyond my reach and the territories we were allowed to venture into. At the edge of the seemingly endless ocean and contemplated how Esme had frozen our bond to begin with. I knew there was no way to ask her. I remembered Dmitri's threat and promise that they might do to us all the things that we had accused them of over the years. As I was the one who had created most of the allegations, I knew every one. I had no urge to experience any of them, let alone all of them. Part of me doubted that Bella would allow them to follow through on that threat, not because of affection, love, or loyalty, but because she wouldn't allow my screams to steal the peace she'd found. Even I had to admit I didn't deserve love or loyalty from her. I had traded that commodity for my son without hesitation. It took some time, and I begged the universe as I completed my task that no one was watching me right now. I didn't want to be stopped, and I would be if I were being observed. I admired the large fire pit I'd created when it was complete. Never in all my years would I have imagined my life would end like this, but loneliness was smothering me. For the first time in my existence, I found myself hoping that God didn't exist and that all there was on the other side was a vast nothingness. As I contemplated my eternity while the flames grew, I realized that no one on the other side would have wanted to see me anyway. I had lived these long, endless years and amounted to nothing. Everything I'd created had been so easily taken. I leapt for the fire eagerly, only hoping for nothing. Keys. As Hope aged, I no longer avoided talking with her about our future. I knew her hopes and dreams. I knew her fantasies. I even knew her desires, though neither of us acted on them in any way. She had identified a few lower guards who had mates out in the world, but I asked her not to do any more tracking until she was one of us, and she agreed. Her gift would be exceptionally strong as a vampire since it could function with this complexity as a human. Part of me hoped that she would be able to direct vampires to their mates without leaving the castle when immortal, while the rest of me thought I might enjoy the occasional breaks from coven life. Either way, I felt joy in her ability. She would bring the vampire world happiness. Our coven, our family, all deserved the happiness I'd found. Hope was eager to provide joy to everyone she could. It was hard now to recognize the unhappy man I'd been before Bella walked into our lives. I had thought life with Athenadora mostly satisfactory. I had thought humans beneath us. I had thought the life I was living was enough. It only took one warrior in the shape of a scared human girl to prove me entirely wrong, and I couldn't be happier. Tonight was movie night, and it was Hope's turn to choose the movie. Her taste was somewhat eclectic, so we could end up watching most anything. I couldn't care less what the movie turned out to be. I was incredibly eager to hold Hope's hand and watch it. That was now an acceptable and accepted behavior. I laughed when we arrived at the theater, and Hope declared that we were watching Suicide Squad. We'd watched it before, but no one complained, and soon we were taking our seats and waiting for the opening credits. Felix. We didn't lose our awareness of the world when our enemies all perished. But we relaxed incrementally. I checked in with Dmitri daily, and he answered the phone when he could. Sora had not yet revealed a gift, so I expected that the kings and queens would ask Elizor to visit after Sora settled a bit. She was keeping Dmitri and the advanced guards that watched over them on their toes. She was not a fan of enclosed places and only returned to the house in the Alps to bathe and change clothes. Otherwise, they ran, they made love, and they explored. Dmitri admitted that he'd never felt so free. As Dmitri was a tracker, I could understand that. Hunting was a required part of his gift. I was pleased that he was experiencing such wonder with his mate still in her newborn year. Hope was maturing by the day and beginning the process of transitioning to her role as queen. Since we'd been granted this time of profound peace, I approved. I never wanted to lose my hope, but it would be best for her to learn slowly what might be expected of her, even if she didn't assume her position until after her 18th birthday. Hope and Keys were always together and always holding hands now. Their bond grew daily, and I wished every happiness for my daughter. She still came home every night, and she still kissed my cheek and hid us before bed. It Was a time of transition for my little family, and ultimately, I was learning to accept that even though she'd become my queen, she'd never stop being my little girl. Bella, planning and implementation had all gone flawlessly. Heidi, Jane, and I had completed each task easily. The ballroom was completely prepared, and we were all ready for the celebration. Everyone in the castle not guarding the perimeter was invited. We had even called Elizor and invited the Denalis to the ball. Dmitri and Sora were excited to attend. This was the first big event since her change, and even now, I could hear her gushing to Dmitri about how excited she was to be here. Sora made me smile. She was the perfect counterpoint to Dmitri's seriousness, yet she was a very hard and dedicated worker. Dmitri was having the time of his life teaching her to fight as he'd once taught me. I knew Dmitri would care less if Sora turned out to be ungifted, but she was a bit nervous about it. I observed each member of our coven entering the ballroom dressed in their absolute finest. Emmett entered with a crowd, and I was happy for him. We'd never regained our former closeness, and he'd never be my brother, but he was my friend. The elites looked in on him and his progress from time to time, offering aid and assistance. Aro joined me in my observations, and I let down my shield to share my thoughts with him. The royals had decided as a group that we would allow our masks to fall somewhat with the vampire community. We would allow ourselves to appear as happy as we truly were when not judging a crime or mediating a dispute. Marcus decided that while peace reigned, he wanted to offer an education to the vampires of our world in hopes that knowledge would reduce crime. The Volturi were no longer who they had once been. Perhaps the show was no longer necessary. Jane approached wearing a stunning silver gown that flowed like water. I hugged her tightly. The only person in attendance who wasn't radiating pure joy was Felix. Aro nodded at my thought that I was going to go talk to him. I embraced him tightly without saying a word, and he held on tightly. I knew he wanted to be here for Hope's entrance to the world. But he looked like he might cry if it were possible. Charlie approached while Felix held me as if that act alone would stop Hope from flying the nest. Terrifying, isn't it? Charlie commented as Felix released me. Felix didn't pretend not to know what Charlie was talking about. He nodded. The key, Charlie advised, is to act like it's just like all the other times you had to let her try her own strength. You stand strong. You smile. You pretend you aren't terrified. In this case, you also remember that she's not actually leaving you. We will all be here to help her if she needs it. I don't think she will, though. She's learned the Volturi from the inside out almost since birth. Felix stood taller and attempted a smile. A little less grimace, I coached. You are happy for her. I know you are. Put the sadness to the back of your mind to deal with later. Heidi joined our small group and took Felix's hand. We taught her everything we could, Heidi assured Felix. The quartet began to play, and Angela, Marcus, Hope, and Keys entered. Aro and I joined them for the first dance. The music was beautiful, and we made our way around the dance floor just the six of us for an entire song. I looked at Hope. She looked almost happy enough to cry. On the next song, Felix led Hope around the ballroom while Heidi danced with Keys. Heidi and Keys appeared to be having a silent conversation full of nods and raised eyebrows. So I expected that there was something occurring tonight that I hadn't been informed about. I contemplated the possibilities and settled on a likely engagement. I hoped that was it. Aro's gaze met mine, and he winked at me. My mate was in on the secret and hadn't told me about it. I heard Elizor being introduced to Sora and found myself unsure of who to watch. I didn't want to miss a moment. I settled on watching Hope but listening to Eliezer. This was such an eventful night. I heard Elizor proclaim Sora a more powerful tracker than Dmitri, as she only had to have an object that belonged to her target at some point in history. I wanted to cheer for Sora, but listening in on purpose was rude, even when you had no choice but to hear. I satisfied myself with the idea of congratulating her later and kept dancing. Aro allowed himself to laugh at my internal monologue. The Denalis all over the room had open mouths from the unexpected show of joy from my mate. Felix. I watched Hope dance with Keys in her first moment as our queen. I had seen to setting her throne in place earlier myself. It was hers now. None of us had won the bet about what age it would appear. My bet of 20 was far too optimistic, and everyone else had assumed it would be there far sooner. My mind flashed through the first moment I held her in my arms. She'd been so tiny. It moved quickly till it landed on the moment Keys had declared her my daughter, and I relived each precious moment of her life with us. Her first time walking, her first time on a bicycle, her first time with Adam. Venturing out into the city and beyond my reach, there were so many firsts. Heidi and I had been gifted beyond measure with the opportunity to raise a child, any child, but I would always be grateful for the time I'd had to raise, guide, and teach Hope. She was truly a treasure. Heidi seemed to be handling this change better than I was. I knew Keys would take excellent care of her. I knew he'd see to it that she had everything she wanted and everything she needed. I knew the time he spent waiting, watching, and guiding had changed him into someone who was emotionally available. And that he would always treat her as his equal. I guess, when it came down to it, I was certain of my daughter's continued happiness. I would stand strong, I would smile, and I would never let Hope see my difficulty. A tinkling of glass drew everyone's immediate attention. Toasts weren't really our style. I found myself watching as Keys got down on one knee and proclaimed his eternal love and devotion for Hope before asking her to be his wife. It was simple, elegant, perfect in every way, and Hope threw herself into Keys's arms with a loud yes before they shared their very first kiss. The night passed, and on occasion, Bella and Angela checked on Heidi and me without showing their concern. They touched base as frequently as they could. When the clock struck midnight, Hope and Keys left the ball together. I knew he was planning on changing her tonight. Things were going as they should, but I still felt like I was a human and had been kicked in the gut. Heidi and I retired only an hour after Hope and Keys' departure. I couldn't remain there any longer, and Heidi seemed to know it. On the way out, Dmitri pulled me into a hug and assured me it would all be all right. I thanked him, but it was probably obvious that the last thing I was feeling at the moment was all right. Heidi and I made love tenderly through the night while sharing our fears. It would be okay eventually. It really would. Keys. Making love with Hope for the first time was magical, and I felt the moment our souls entwined. When it was time, Hope offered me her throat, completely unafraid. I was terrified. I found that I could hear Hope's thoughts through our bond. She encouraged me silently to change her. I did. Venom flowed as it should, and soon Hope's change was well underway. When I rose and clothed myself, there was a light tapping at my door. I knew who it would be. Bella embraced me tightly and encouraged me to distract Aro, who had accompanied her, while she dressed Hope in something comfortable. Once Hope was dressed in her favorite soft pajamas for girls' nights, Aro was allowed in. Bella and Aro guarded Hope, and I like patient sentinels. If I felt Hope was getting too hot, Bella would be there with an ice pack or cold cloth. If I worried too much about Hope's reaction to the pain of the change, she'd be there with quiet reassurance, but mostly they sat and waited while I reminded Hope of every memory I'd been present for. I didn't want her to lose anything. Felix and Heidi had made her childhood one worth remembering. The knocks on the door, timid meek things, started at dawn. Jane was first to arrive. Felix and Heidi were next. The rest of the elites trickled in. Sora and Charlie, neither yet an elite, arrived at nearly the same time. Last to arrive were Marcus and Angela. They'd been in a debate with Lexi about her inability to attend. Some of us would have to leave before Hope woke up, but I was more and more relieved as each person appeared. Felix took Hope's off our hand and started reminding her of things I hadn't been there for. I was grateful. I looked to Bella for more reassurance. "You're never alone," she promised quietly. I felt better with the reminder. Between Felix and me talking to Hope and Bella's reassuring hand on my shoulder when the stress level rose too high, time passed. Soon it was the third day of Hope's change, and we were discussing who should go and who should stay. I asked Bella to stay, so in case things went seriously wrong, we had her shield. Felix was staying both because of his strength and because he was her father. Heidi was staying because her mother's presence might soothe her, and Dmitri offered to stay because he had the most recent experience with out-of-control newborns. I asked everyone else to leave, or to at last wait outside the door and down the hall a bit to prevent Hope from getting overwhelmed as she went to feed for the first time. I knew Angela really wanted to assist her fellow queen, but she didn't have the skill to restrain an out-of-control newborn, so she might end up being a hindrance. Marcus understood and promised they'd both return after an initial adjustment period. Sora excused herself, as she had no experience in the situation to offer besides moral support. Charlie said he'd be out in the hallway with the elites. I was grateful for his friendship. To my surprise, Aro left without argument. But then, he knew his mate's capabilities and often trusted her in situations I would have tried to protect Hope in. Bella removed her hand from my shoulder and made herself inconspicuous. In a corner as the final minutes of Hope's change ticked down. Keys. Hope's awakening was unexpected. She recognized me instantly and held me tightly enough that a rib nearly cracked. Her kiss was deep and passionate, and only knowing that she'd feel better after feeding combined with the guests in our home prevented me from allowing her to pull me back to bed. She seemed relatively calm for a newborn. She wasn't running for the window or snarling in a corner. Felix shifted somewhat uncomfortably with our moment of passion, and Hope noticed him too. "Daddy," she cried and went from my embrace to his. "Is your throat burning, baby girl?" he asked. At her nod, I joined them, and the three of us went to the feeding chamber with Heidi, Dmitri, and Bella following behind just in case they were needed. Hope fed voraciously. I promised myself I'd find some way to thank the cleaning staff and watched as Heidi led Hope away to shower. I reminded myself that they weren't trying to take my mate from me, even if that was what it felt like. And did a quick check-in with everyone while Hope showered. I continued my planning on things Hope would need. It felt imperative with her gift that she be able to defend herself. The wrong element would want to try to control her, and even though we were free of apparent enemies, I needed my mate to be capable in self-defense to the point that she be able to eliminate a threat to her alone if she was ever placed in that position. I would do my best to make sure she never was, but she needed to be able to protect herself on the off chance. Hope's participation in court right now would be dependent on her adjustment and her preferences. At one time, I would have, wrongly, enforced what I saw as the right thing to do. Her throne was ready for her when she was ready to take it. Between Marcus and me, we would test that Hope's knowledge of the vampire world, its laws and customs, remained intact. I was of the belief that the longer you had to prepare yourself for the transition, the easier it was for you. However, that didn't explain Angela's relatively easy awakening. Perhaps it was just an individual thing. When Hope was returned to me, freshly showered and dressed, I decided to take her to the throne room. I was eager to show her that her throne was in place and just waiting for her to be ready. Hope was having a difficult time controlling the speed of her walk and the strength of her grip on my hand, but she was doing wonderfully. I was so proud of her, and I knew, as I'd known since she was very young, that she would be a wonderful queen. When we arrived in the throne room, it appeared that those in the castle had been tracking our path and somehow managed to arrive ahead of us. Everyone was there. We had all been a part of her growth, and it just felt right to me. When Hope saw her throne, she approached it slowly, as if she were unsure it was really hers. I joined her on the dais and put my hand on her shoulder supportively as she turned to take her rightful place for the first time. To my surprise, everyone from the cleaning staff to Dmitri and Sora bowed as one, whispering the word, "Mistress." It was a powerful moment. The chef had even ventured up to participate. Hope teared up a little bit, and I saw that several in the crowd were as well. Bella sat on her throne first. Aro'S joined her on his. Marcus and Angela took their places, and finally, I made my way to my throne. The triumvirate was all present with their mates for the very first time. Bella, Hope's first year was not as full of challenges as I expected, instead, it was full of promises. Hope identified so many mates that it was going to take time after her first year for her to be able to track them all. One night, I was chatting with Emmett and asked why he'd been avoiding asking Sora to look for him. I thought Emmett, though his service wasn't up yet, deserved a second chance. Emmett explained carefully that he wasn't ready to have another mate yet. He needed to work on himself, build his confidence more, and learn to be stronger in relationships. He explained that he felt some responsibility for Rosalie's misbehaviors because he accepted she was fully and didn't try to take charge and led her on a healthier path sooner than he did. I hid my pity, not at his desire to improve himself, but at his guilt, and changed the subject. I didn't feel qualified to advise him in this matter. I was unsure if early and firm intervention would have altered a thing. The only thing I was sure of is that the past could not be altered. Things had worked out, mostly for the best. But there had certainly been hiccups on the way. Dmitri, we were lucky that we were in a period of prolonged peace. At 9 months old, Keys left the castle with Hop and a collection of guards and staff of various levels on an extended tracking expedition. We made sure they were well guarded while also seeing to the security of the castle. Change was coming yet again. I knew some of the guards wouldn't return. We didn't require terms of service, so they were free to leave if their new mates wanted life out of the castle. Still, I was confident that most would be back. Over the years, we'd built more than a guard. We'd built a true family. Bella hugged each and every member as they left the castle, though, as if she expected none to return. Even her friend Layla was off to seek her mate. I was sure our seamstress would return, but Bella treated each like it was a final goodbye. We stayed on top of security matters, and in Felix's search for the next troublemaker. My piles of reports only dwindled slightly. Bella, Felix, and I began sparring together again. None of us was willing to let our skills get rusty. It was a lot of fun, but I was shocked at first by the skills Bella had gained since our last session. Turns out, she'd turned to keys to teach her when he needed a distraction from waiting for his growing mate. I felt a bit foolish for not having noticed over the years. Sora loved attending sparring sessions with us. Bella taught her the tricks Cassandra and the other upper guards had shared about using momentum, speed, and their own weight against an opponent. One night, Sora asked me why Bella was so easy to relate to. I found myself surprised that in all the time we'd talked and the many subjects we'd spoken about, I'd never told her Bella's tale in its entirety. I remedied the situation, and my Sora looked at me in awe. She tries to see that we get the love we deserve in all the ways she didn't before she came here, Sora stated. I found myself nodding, realizing the truth of that statement. Bella tried to show every member of the Volturi, every day, that they were appreciated, accepted, and loved. Sometimes she did it with a compliment. Sometimes she did it with a hug. Sometimes she just assured fair play. Still, she'd always cared, and she'd always shown it. I shared Marcus's tale while we were talking about the kings. I thought Sora would run to him right then and offer comfort at the end. Marcus had suffered the most of all of us by far. I was happy that he'd gotten a miracle. Of all of us, he deserved it. Apparently, my sharing the stories of others motivated Sora to get to know the guards better and learn their stories from them. Everyone but Sora herself knew that one day she'd work by my side in full. Many days, I'd track her when I ended my shift and find her either sparring or talking with upper or lower guards the way Bella had. She made me proud in every way. None of my imaginings over the Aro'S had been as wonderful as my Sora was in truth. I was a lucky man. Felix had been working with the lower guards personally to increase their fighting skills. I was glad to see the guards improve me. NTS, but sad to see Felix struggling to adapt to Hope's flight from the nest. I made sure to never leave him too alone, and when Heidi was out of the castle, I made sure to find a video game I wanted to play, a movie to watch, or even a game of cards. I didn't want my friend to be lonely. I knew it would take him time to adjust, but adjusting was challenging for a vampire. So I made sure my presence, my friendship, was always available when he needed me. Slowly, our members returned home with new mates. It was a challenge as the humans were changed and grew into responsible, full members of society. But we were stronger for the growth. In a pause between returns, Aro'S and Bella announced that they were taking a week to visit the Major at his ranch. I hadn't realized that they kept in contact with the Major over the years. But I should have. Bella would never turn her back on anyone she'd once considered hers, and the Major's kindness had earned her loyalty. Aro'S. We were greeted warmly on our visit to the Whitlock ranch. I observed frequently the way the Whitlocks treated Bella. In a different life, she could have belonged somewhere like this. Our first night there, Peter created a bonfire. Guitars and whiskey were brought out, and we had an evening full of music, uncomplicated truth, and genuine communion. I didn't know the songs. Bella only knew a few and joined along enthusiastic. Ally and completely off pitch when she did. It was adorable. Bella shared the story of Hope being brought to the castle. She asked that they keep it to themselves, but she shared it. I was unconcerned. These particular allies could be trusted. Not all covens could, nor all allies, but these three knew loyalty in their very cores. I felt pleasantly refreshed during our week with them, but I refused to follow Bella's lead and try horseback riding. I loved watching her so free, though. Bella took to it with grace and was soon riding a lovely black stallion. They moved with total synchronization and it was absolutely lovely. Not to mention arousing, to watch. By the time the week was over and we returned home, I counted myself as one of the Major's friends. It was a wonderful experience. Before we left, the Whitlocks expressed their wish to be included in any celebrations for Emmett. I realized that the date of Emmett's release from service wasn't that far away, at least not to a vampire's mind. I assured them that they would be included in the coming festivities. Emmett. I was surprised when Dmitri sought me out while I was sparring with one of the other upper guards. I was concerned had I done something wrong and not been aware of it. Luckily, there was no issue. I was somewhat stunned when Dmitri asked me if I'd considered staying when my length of service was up. He also asked me about my longer-term ambitions and where I thought I could do the most good. I admitted that my favorite time with the Cullens was when I was erasing our past and performing IT duties during our various moves. And that if I could choose, I would like to assist the technological division in some way, but that I would understand if my strength was of more value to the Volturi. I explained that I was happy enough just having a place to truly belong. To my immense surprise, the conversation didn't stop there. Dmitri questioned me on what I saw as the best way to achieve my goal, giving me the option of learning under Felix's tutelage or seeking updated qualifications from one of the many universities nearby. This was a question I had to ponder. But, when it came down to it, I did not want to have to relearn the art of playing human, and I didn't want to be away from the family and friends I had acquired for 4 long years, so I asked if Felix might be willing to tutor me. Dmitri nodded, accepting my answer and my reasoning, saying he'd see what he could do to arrange it after my term of service ended. He left with, "You're doing a great job here. We're proud of you. Keep it up." I felt heard. I felt seen. I felt appreciated, and most of all, I felt like I belonged. Who would have thought all those years ago that punishment of any kind would lead me to where I belonged? Emmett wasn't really a tux kind of guy. Though he wore them when the situation called for it. That limited me a bit in the kind of party I could throw to celebrate the end of his required service to the Volturi. I wanted this party to be a surprise for him, but I also wanted everyone to be there. Heidi and Jane would definitely be required to help me brainstorm this one. I found them in the throne room, and to my surprise, they were trying to come up with ideas to celebrate Emmett as well. We moved the discussion to my office, where there was slightly less of a chance of being overheard. When we decided what we'd be doing, we began forming a guest list. I wanted all the friends and family that Emmett had acquired with us to be there, but I also wanted to give him an opportunity to rebuild old connections with old allies. To me, it seemed that inviting them all to this party would be the perfect way. They weren't required to attend, of course, but they would have the option. The royal calligrapher smiled when we entered his office. "What mischief are you ladies up to this time?" he asked. When we explained our current mission, he smiled widely. "This is perfect," he declared. "I'll get right on it." Once he was set to his task, I went about my normal duties. It has taken some time now to answer all my correspondence. At the bottom of the stack of letters was a letter from a publisher. I'd been trying for years now to get a publisher to agree to take on one of my many stories. My shoulders fell slightly. I assumed it was yet another rejection letter. Still, I opened it. To my surprise, they not only wanted my current story, but they asked if there was any possibility that I could turn the single book into at least a 3-book series. This was yet one more of my dreams fulfilled. I made my way to the throne room with a swift step. I'd learned long ago that queens running in the hallways put the guards on edge, thinking there was something wrong, and I didn't want to alarm anyone. I approached Aro'S throne and curled up on his lap, offering him the letter. His joyous shout of, "You did it," caused everyone in the room to take notice. Dmitri and Felix, who hadn't been present, even entered to see what the celebration was about. After Keys, Hope, Angela, and Marcus had all read the missive, Jane asked to see, then passed it to Dmitri and Felix. I was passed around my friends and family while each offered hugs and sincere congratulations. I felt light and like I was on the way to accomplishing my every dream. Keys declared a hunt for the evening to celebrate my success. I agreed quickly. Charlie came in and the letter was passed to him. He hugged me tightly. "You've wanted this since you could speak," he proclaimed. "Congratulations, baby girl." We ventured far from the castle that night on our hunt. Aro and I even shared our prey. Besides lovemaking, there was nothing more intimate for a couple to do. It was a wonderfully decadent night. When we all arrived home, fully sated, Aro and I disappeared into our rooms for the remainder of the night. I thought he might be happier than I was at seeing my goals achieved. When morning came, the calligrapher approached me, saying there was one name on my guest list that he couldn't locate any sort of address for. I was unsurprised to find it was Garrett. He didn't seem the type to have so much as a post office box out in the human world. I told him that I'd see to this one myself and not to let it worry him. I made my way to my office and called Garrett directly. I offered him assurances that this was a celebration and his attendance was in no way required, but that I was certain his presence would matter to Emmett, and it would mean a great deal to me. In Garrett's surly way, he said he'd have to think about it. I disconnected the call with a smile on my face. I was strangely confident that Garrett would not only show up but have a great time. Felix. Having an empty nest was difficult for a while, but Heidi and I adjusted. In fact, We grew closer than we ever had been in the process. Hope was now a queen, and she had adjusted amazingly quickly to her new role. I smiled every time I heard Keys and Hope debating some aspect of law and custom. Most of the time, she considered them outdated and was asking Keys if this change or that one wouldn't make them more current. I expected that Keys would become frustrated with a mate who was willing to challenge him, but instead, he seemed to love every instant. Heidi and I took nights to ourselves now, venturing out into the city or even visiting towns and cities nearby. We explored museums and studied architecture. We saw the world through fresh eyes. It was perfect. We even occasionally sought the privacy of a hotel and stayed for a few days. Making love and reaffirming our connection. I felt complete. When Dmitri found me and explained Emmett's wish to join my team, I agreed eagerly. I thought he would be an asset to us when he was up to speed. And I could see him fitting in easily. I added a workplace for him in the center of everything where he could learn by observation, and we would all be on hand to teach him the finer points of the work. We had so many lower guards now that some of the especially skilled ones were being promoted to the upper guard. Hope's searching out mates had swelled our ranks admirably. I never considered that increasing the happiness of our guard might also swell our ranks, but it certainly had. Charlie. To my surprise, Hope approached me. She'd never done so since she'd taken on her role as queen. Keys and I still spent time together. But Hope had seemed a bit distant to me. I told myself she'd been busy seeking out mates for the Volturi and didn't let it bother me. Her entire world had just changed after all. Hope explained that my mate was out there in the world, but that she was young yet, and Hope knew that another child wouldn't be allowed into the castle, and she was unsure how to approach me with the information. I felt torn. My match was out there, but I knew watching over her could bring more vampires to her door. Though it made me feel a little helpless, I thanked Hope and asked for my potential mate's approximate age. To my relief, she wasn't a babe. She was already 10 years old. However, when to approach her stymied me. I was significantly older than most vampires here, at least in physical appearance. I was unsure when the right time to approach her might be. Hope assured me she would keep watch and tell me if she ever seemed sad. I decided that would have to be good enough and went back to consulting with Felix, who was attempting to help a coven wipe their existence from electronic databases, and wanted to know what physical records might need to be taken care of. We were helping the world's covens more than we normally would since it was peacetime, and it seemed like a good idea that we show covens that we were no longer who we had been. Still, my mind stayed on my mate. Somewhere out there in the world was the woman who would complete me. The thought gave me peace. Bella, Emmett's big day had arrived. We asked the upper guard, who were excused from duty for the day, to take Emmett out and show him a good time. He hadn't been allowed around humans for a while, so it seemed he might want to experience the world again. While they were gone, we prepared things. No longer did the lower guard do all the work. We worked together. We chose a ground-level room that usually didn't see much use. We staged it with Felix's bar, video game consoles, a dance floor area, and the obligatory poker tables. This was Emmett's party, and he didn't seem to enjoy formal dances or solemn get-togethers, so even though our masks would drop with the visitors we'd invited, we tried to make every activity something Emmett enjoyed. It took the majority of the day to create something we were all satisfied he would love. To my surprise, our guests took part in the preparations and even offered suggestions on what Emmett might like. Jasper suggested a karaoke machine. It didn't take too long to locate. I couldn't wait to watch people using it, though I would try to avoid singing myself. My singing voice hadn't improved much with the change. I was impressed with the outcome and the turnout. I hoped Emmett would be, too. A lot of Carlisle's old allies had apparently been waiting for me to show signs of forgiveness for Emmett. They were unwilling to offend a queen by offering him the hand of friendship. I felt a bit guilty for that, but it made this night all the more special. I could give him back pieces of what he'd lost to add to the life he'd created for himself. Promptly at 7 p.m., the first of the upper guards made their way in to confirm that everything was ready. Emmett was led in, blindfolded, by his team. When the blindfold was removed, our declaration of surprise probably disturbed humans in the town, it was so loud. Emmett stood, shocked into stillness, for a full minute. Then his smile overtook the rest of his features, and he started to greet his guests, one at a time. Heidi turned on the music, and we all watched, rapt, as Emmett had connections returned to him that he probably thought were lost forever. When every guest had been greeted and every member of the Volturi had been welcomed, Felix handed Emmett a whiskey and said, "Welcome home." Dmitri and Sora made their way over to the video games while most navigated to play poker. I just watched on with Aro'S hand firmly in mine, sharing my thoughts with my mate. Jasper was the first of the guests to move. "This is a party, y'all," he declared and joined Emmett at the poker table. I spotted Garrett talking to Kate from the Denali coven while Marcus looked on with a satisfied smile. I hoped it meant that Garrett had found his mate. Though a lot of our kind did it, I didn't think we were meant to wander alone. I thought Garrett's irreverent nature might fit in there. Soon, all of our guests were entertained. I went off, with Aro'S nod of approval for my plans, to complete my side mission for tonight. It took only a few minutes to locate Hope and ask my favor. She agreed without hesitation and approached Jasper. He looked confused for a minute when she took his hand, then was shocked to stillness by what she told him. When he moved again, he folded his game and approached me. "Hope says that my mate is of age and is located in the city of New York. I realize you are queen and have other responsibilities to see to," Jasper said. "I'd be honored to accompany you to find her." I jumped in. "You're worth it, too, Jasper." Jasper hugged me, and I hugged him back. It amazed me how strong a bond it was possible to build with just a little kindness. Peter and Charlotte, having no doubt heard the entirety of the conversation, joined us. "Thank you," was all Peter said. He dragged Jasper back to the poker game, and I smiled after them. Charlotte watched me watching the party. "This isn't a small favor you do for my friend," she declared. "I wish I could offer our entire world their mates, Charlotte. Jasper has struggled significantly more than most. We have Hope. Her gift can offer Jasper something I'm not capable of." When I looked into Aro'S eyes for the first time, I was healed in ways I thought impossible. I was given a second chance to truly live instead of just surviving. Being mated yourself, you know that the bond only gets stronger from there, not weaker. "Thank you for caring so much," Charlotte offered. Then she hugged me and went back to watching her mate lose at poker. The night progressed well. To everyone's dismay, including mine, I was called to sing only once when we were all gathered around the karaoke machine. They were smart enough not to ask again. It was fun, even if my performance garnered a few chuckles from Aro'S and Keys. I enjoyed watching everyone, and some even had wonderful voices and did a better job than the original artists with the songs they chose to sing. When dawn streamed through the windows, Emmett found me and pulled me into one of his bear hugs. "Thanks, Bella. The party was amazing." "Welcome home, Emmett," I said. "You fought for your place here. You've earned it." Emmett stood with the royals and said goodbye and thanked every guest for coming. I smiled especially widely when I saw that Garrett was leaving with the Denalis. I hoped he'd found his place. Once every guest was sent on their way, I went to collect my flight bag. I found Aro'S already zipping his up. He'd beaten me this time. "Marcus has agreed to watch the castle," Aro'S said. "Volturi don't make the same mistakes twice, even during peacetime. We are free for however long the search takes." I threw myself into his arms. It was more spectacular than it was last year to be in his arms. My love and contentment were almost all-consuming. When we stepped outside the door, Jane was standing there, flight bag in hand. "You aren't leaving without me, mistress. Danger finds you when you do." I dropped my bag and hugged Jane. "How about from now on you just call me sister?" I asked gently. Jane embraced me again, and our little trio made our way to where we were meeting Jasper's family. The plane was prepared and ready to take us across the ocean. My only concern was Jasper being forced to experience all the emotions of the big city. My shield didn't work in such a way that I could block him from the overload. I found myself wishing I could. Aro'S told me about the suite he'd reserved for our party as we descended the stairs. He wanted us all together in case of danger. Though I'd never wish suffering on another being, I found myself hoping that Jasper's mate had experienced enough in life to be able to truly relate to him and appreciate his strength. Keys and Hope were waiting with Jasper, Peter, and Charlotte. We moved as one to the garage. Bella was practically glowing at the opportunity to see the Major meet his mate. I it that I was eager to see who she might be as well. The trip across the sea took a full 14 hours. During the trip, the Major's nervousness spread through the plane. He calmed down some when Bella took his hand as we came into land. She comforted him and told him that his mate wouldn't have to wait much longer, and neither would he. I don't know if his nerves faded or if he simply stopped projecting, but the landing was calmer. We'd timed things perfectly, and twilight was falling as we stepped off the plane. Hope and Keys led the way. We ventured farther and farther into the bad side of town. We moved at human speed. There were far too many cameras around to take advantage of our natural pace. When Hope stopped, we were in an alleyway filled with the homeless. Part of me was horrified that the Major's mate had been forced to live in squalor, while the rest of me acknowledged that someone with an easy life would have never been able to understand this particular vampire. Hope pointed to one figure covered in blankets, and then we all stepped back into the shadows so the Major could approach without being overwhelmed by an audience. The Major crouched down beside the covered figure and asked, "Miss?" The blankets moved, revealing green eyes and red hair. The young woman gasped and said, "I dreamed of you." They spoke for a few brief moments. It didn't take long for the Major to convince the girl to come with him. I imagined that almost any end would seem preferable to her current condition. I led the way out of the slums into the suite. My mind, like everyone else's, I'd guess, was going over all the many things this young woman would need. She was so thin in the Major's arms. It would take time to build her up and let her regain her health. I took the liberty of placing a call to our hotel to get them started preparing a selection of foods she might like. The trip took a full half hour. Bella offered the young woman her coat. She took it eagerly. It only took a moment to be checked in at the hotel and directed to the penthouse. The clerk assured me that the food we'd ordered would be delivered momentarily. When we arrived, the Major's mate looked around with wide eyes. I informed the Major that food would be right up, and Bella and I claimed one of the rooms for our own. I heard the others giving Jasper and his mate space as well. Bella only exited the room to offer the Major the spare set of pajamas she'd brought. She was the most considerate woman I'd ever met. Jasper. I'd actually held my mate in my arms. I'd learned her name. It was Misty. When I asked her what she'd like to do, she looked at me as if I were crazy. I explained that food had been ordered for her and would be arriving soon, but that if she needed anything else, it could easily be arranged. Misty was eager for food, so we relaxed on the couch. She stared out the window and into the city. It all looks so pretty from up here. The knock at the door startled my mate, and I soothed her before opening the door. Aro had offered many options for my mate, and she stared at the food in wonder. I encouraged her to eat whatever she wanted and not to worry about what was left. She took me at my word but only ate some soup. I imagined her stomach wouldn't be able to handle anything heavier. I knew it was going to be a long road to bring my mate back to a healthy weight. I hoped Voltera would allow us the time we needed. I heard Bella and Jane talking in the background. I didn't bother to listen in. I had complete faith that whatever they were up to, it would be to mine and Misty's benefit. While Misty ate, I shared stories of the horse ranch and the life we'd built there. I used to love horses, in a different life, Misty offered. I shared more about each individual horse on the ranch. She looked at me in amazement. I explained each horse's temperament and personality with her. It sounds like a dream, Misty admitted. When she finished eating, Misty was cautious but asked me, "Can I take a bath, sir?" She was hesitant and a little afraid to ask me for anything. I asked her to call me Jasper and escorted her to our room. She looked at the bathroom in awe and said, "I won't be long." I handed her Bella's pajamas and assured her she could take as much time as she wanted. That was when I actually looked at the bathroom and saw that Bella and Jane had combined the products they'd brought with them to offer Misty choices. I left the bedroom and knocked lightly on Bella and Aro'S door. Bella opened immediately and asked me if she'd forgotten something my mate might need. My words came rushing out of me. I felt inadequate. I felt gifted beyond belief. I felt overwhelmed. I felt unworthy of such a gift. Bella assured me that she, Jane, and Hope would venture out to the shops and select the basics for my mate as soon as the shops were open and that I wasn't alone. Peter's hand landed gently on my shoulder, and he and Charlotte offered their reassurances, too. It touched me in a way nothing had in all of my life, not even the vague human memories that I could still recall. Charlotte decided not to come on our shopping expedition, preferring to St. I back and provide support for Jasper and female companionship for Misty. Though I would have enjoyed her company, I agreed that Misty would need to get to know Charlotte. It had been a beautiful thing to watch Charlotte gently untangle Misty's hair the previous night. Charlotte was able to learn a little of Misty's story. She had been a teenage runaway who fled from an abusive stepfather after her mother had perished in a car accident. She was unsure how long ago it had been, simply referring to it as another life. Misty had admitted that she'd been dreaming of Jasper for years but had thought him a figment of her imagination. It took time to choose clothes that we thought Misty would like and feel comfortable in. This was my first shopping expedition since my change. Heidi had taken such good care of me since she learned that shopping wasn't something I enjoyed. She'd always taken care of it for me. Styles had changed a bit, but we'd learned that Misty liked bright colors and comfortable fabrics. We made sure to choose things that were soft and should be comfortable. Jane was the best at choosing clothing, I thought. Our laughter echoed through the stores we visited. We had a wonderful time. Hope insisted on choosing a variety of floral-scented bath products. She might have gone a bit overboard offering multiple options, but somehow I didn't think anyone would mind. We found bath salts and bubble baths since Misty seemed to really like the bathtub. She'd warmed the water twice the night before to extend the experience. I made sure to find a robe and slippers as well as a selection of comfortable shoes to go with the clothes we'd purchased. I wanted Misty to feel comfortable and at home with us, even if her home was a horse ranch. It was okay to be separate but still together when it mattered. And I wanted us to matter to Misty. Charlotte. Bella walked into the penthouse like a soldier returning from battle. The smile on her face was victorious, though I was unsure what had been conquered. I helped with the bags and putting things away. It was restful having other women around for companionship. I genuinely liked Misty and thought that she would grow as she learned more about herself. Not just that she was a survivor. I knew it would take time, and I would do my best to be supportive without rushing the process. When everything was put away, Misty entered courteously and gripped Jasper's hand in a way that might have hurt if they were both human. Jasper opened the closet door slowly and showed her the results of the shopping expedition. I don't know how to choose, Misty admitted. For today, Bella said gently, pick your favorite color, and we'll help you. Red, Misty said. I used to feel beautiful when I wore red. Then we'll help you feel beautiful again, I declared. I chose a soft sweater while Bella chose a pair of black leggings. We paired our choices with a pair of red ballet flats that should be comfortable. To my horror, Misty started crying. Jasper comforted her immediately, asking what was wrong. I rubbed her back while she admitted, nothing is wrong, it's just been so long since anyone was truly kind to me. People on the street can only help each other so much. And the last real kindness I remember was my mother hugging me goodbye the day she died. I felt helpless that I could do no more than rub her back as she cried, but also relieved. This was the beginning of Misty truly beginning to heal. It might be the beginning of Jasper's healing, too, if I were being honest. Perhaps they'd learn to truly live together. Maybe that was how it should be. When Misty's emotional moment had passed, and Jasper had confirmed that Misty was comfortable being alone with us for a few minutes, he excused himself, and we helped Misty dress. She looked like a totally different person with freshly clean skin, freshly brushed hair, and new clothing. We showed her to a full-length mirror, and she touched her face gently. It's been a long time since I saw my reflection. I'm older now, she said. Bella hugged her gently, and with the kind of affection you'd see a mother give to her child. Things only get better from here, Bella promised gently. Misty hugged her back fiercely. Jane put a hand on Misty's shoulder. You're not alone anymore, and you never will be again, Jane promised. I put my hand on Misty's other shoulder, sharing Jane's promise. We stayed in the penthouse for 3 days. I knew being close to so many humans would have been hell for Jasper's gift, but he didn't show it. His control was perfect. He didn't even project his own emotions. By the time we left, Misty was able to eat full meals instead of just soup and was comfortable with choosing her own clothing. I saw both as giant leaps forward in her health. On the 3rd day, Misty asked me what home was like. I told stories about the ranch and the horses. I also told her about Peter's pranks and all the mischief he got up to. Aro, who'd been carefully quiet through most conversations over the past days, said, I can have you home by evening if you'd like to see it for yourself. I'd like that, Misty declared. Jane went out and came back with suitcases, and as we packed Misty's things, Aro got the pilot to work on fueling and checking the plane and doing all the things it took to get it ready for takeoff. By the time we were at the plane, everything was ready. And the pilot was waiting patiently for us. Misty was a bit nervous on takeoff and landing, but having Jasper near and holding her hand seemed to help her find the needed confidence. SUVs were waiting for us when we landed. Keys and Hope surprised us all when they said that Marcus would need them home soon. I had expected them to join us a little longer. Hugs were exchanged all around, and I wondered how I had not noticed the Volturi becoming a coven that felt free to share their emotions freely. When the plane was refilled, we waved them off and watched as the plane rose into the sky before getting into the SUVs. The one holding Peter, Misty, Jasper, and me led the way. It was twilight when we all arrived at the ranch. I was pleased that there was still enough light for Misty to see it by. During the flight, we had explained to Misty what we were. Bella started the conversation. I would have held it somewhere open where Misty could have gotten space from us if it were up to me. However, she hadn't reacted badly. She just admitted, I knew all along. Sometimes, red-eyed strangers would convince one of us to go with them. Those people never returned, and people on the streets talk. When we drove up, Charger, our newest acquisition, made his way to the fence. Misty walked over to him and let him smell her before she stroked his neck. It was a beautiful moment. Jasper watched on, with awe as his mate started the long process of making herself at home. Jasper approached and told her about Charger's rescue. So you lived another life too, she said to the horse. We left Jasper and Misty with Charger and carried her things into the ranch. I started making room for Misty's things alongside Jasper's and marveled at how many things could change from offering genuine kindness. If Jasper had not been kind to Bella, he might not have earned her loyalty, his release, and the favor of finding his mate. So many lives had been changed with simple affection and a few kind words. IHEA, rode Misty's voice echoing up from the living room. I think I could feel at home here, she said. Bella, Jane, and I made our way to the grocery store to stock the house with food. Jane looked at the food as if it might be dangerous. But Bella led the way, making sure Misty's needs would be seen to. I helped, offering options when things looked edible. I think I chose mostly snack foods, though, Becca used they were already prepared and looked nice. When we arrived at home, Bella helped Aro'S stock the kitchen, a sight I never thought I'd see, while I got on the computer and began to learn about cooking. I watched videos, studied recipes, and researched nutrition. I hoped Misty would remember something of cooking, and I knew Bella would be here to help for a time, but ultimately the task might be something Misty and I learned to do together. While I was at it, I got on Amazon and ordered some cookbooks to add to our library. While I was at it, Peter came and suggested a bonfire. I thought, it seemed like a perfect way to welcome Misty to the family, so Peter fetched wood, and I brought the guitars and the whiskey. It was a beautiful night full of stars when we gathered around the bonfire. We sang old songs and told old stories. Aro'S shared some of his past, as did Bella. Misty even shared more of her history with us. She'd had a near idyllic life before her mother died, it seemed. As the night grew deeper, Bella ended up on Aro'S lap, and Misty fell asleep on Jasper's shoulder. Jasper took Misty up to bed and stayed nearby just in case she woke. We didn't want her afraid of unfamiliar surroundings. We'd been home 3 days when Misty approached me, more nervous than she had been since we arrived. Char, I don't like my hair like this. Can we make it shorter? I agreed immediately, and we researched beauticians together on the computer. When we found one she liked that also had evening hours, we called to make an appointment, just to be told she was free if we'd like to visit now. Jasper joined Misty and me on the trip to the beautician's shop. I don't know if it was for Misty's comfort or his own, but I didn't ask. It didn't really matter. They were mates. It was the way of things to be together. Jasper stayed outside while Misty and I went in. She looked through the books of hairstyles and chose a chin-length style that was shorter in the back. She was so excited at getting to choose her own hairstyle that I was excited for her and a little pitying. She'd been unable to make choices for so long. The beautician washed, cut, and styled Misty's hair. I liked her. She was efficient without being cold and definitely recreated the style that Misty wanted. I made sure that we purchased the necessary brushes and styling products so that Misty could recreate the style herself at home. Misty had a more confident stride as she left the salon. She threw herself into Jasper's arms when she reached him. He laughed and spun her around. His joy matched hers, and it was a wonderful moment. When we arrived home, everyone complimented Misty's hair. Her confidence seemed to grow by the minute. Peter suggested that we leave the house to Jasper and Misty for the night, so Aro'S, Bella, and Jane went into the city to hunt, while Peter and I wandered the ranch, staying close just in case we were needed. Over the next few days, Bella set herself to teaching Misty and me to cook. I knew the time of the Voltera's departure was growing near, but I hadn't really thought about it much. They couldn't stay forever, though, and they had a world to rule. When the day of their departure arrived, Bella asked Misty if there was anything she needed. It wasn't like the plane would leave without them, but it was still an act of kindness. Aro'S was craving home, I knew, even if he didn't voice the thought. Bella was still making sure Misty had everything she needed before she could bear to leave us. Misty admitted she wanted to learn to ride a horse, and Jasper's eyes lit up. Bella and Aro hugged everyone. And Jane made sure that we all had her number, too, with forceful instructions that we were to call before a situation developed into a problem. Aro assured us, as he got into the SUV, that we could take our time with Misty's change and base the timing on her needs. He explained that he'd learned that healing took time. He too told us to call if anything seemed to be going wrong. We waved goodbye as they drove off back to the world of problems and politics. I would miss them, all three of them. Aro. Unfortunately, we had a trial waiting for us when we arrived home. I was uncertain why they didn't handle it in our absence. Trials were so rare these days, but when I saw the situation for myself, I understood. It was yet another instance of revealing one's true nature to a human. Instead of a car accident, the male vampire had saved a woman from a potential rapist. This was a daily occurrence with vampires feeding on criminals worldwide. However, in this situation, the girl who would have been raped had returned, falsely worried about the vampire's health and ability to confront her attacker. My brothers were looking for some of Bella's individual wisdom. They wanted an excuse, any excuse, not to have to condemn the pair to death. Most of the time the letter of the law was just, fitting, and right. In this case, it wouldn't have been though. Bella too. Okay, charge as she tended to do in the rare case where the punishment would not fit the crime. Instead of speaking to them as if they were on trial, she spoke with them as if they were interviewing for jobs. When she finally discovered places where both defendants could fit in our society, she ordered that the girl had to be changed within a month. Mistress, the male admitted, I haven't the control to change her. Instead of losing stride or even letting this faze her, Bella asked the guard for a volunteer to change the girl. To my surprise, it was Jane who stepped forward. Jane had never changed anyone before or shown interest in it. Still, I had no doubt she was capable. Her control was impeccable and had been for centuries. Jane escorted the pair from the throne room to a smaller second-floor suite. The male's face showed pure shock as he left the throne room alive. It seemed we had gained a new member of the family. I did not doubt that Jane would be determined to help her new charge. Jane's loyalty almost automatically granted one Bella's loyalty too. Bella. 50 years had passed so quickly. To make it even better, every year seemed to bring change that was good for us. Every new addition over the years had brought us something unique, and except in Hope's case, something we didn't even realize we'd been missing. The broken girl from more than 50 years ago was now only a faded memory. The only memory that stood out anymore was Edward's proclamation of, "It will be like we never existed." However, instead of the hurt, the anger, or the fear the memory used to bring, now it brought a chuckle. I wondered what the Cullens would have done differently if they'd truly had the gift to see the future, not just the endless choices available. I decided that if they had done something differently, it likely would have been based on the fear of the coming consequences, not any actual issue of morality or love. Aro, Hope, Keys, Marcus, Angela, Charlie, and I were going to the theater to celebrate. Les Miserables tickets had been released, and I'd never seen it personally. Neither had Angela. I reminisced as Jane helped me with the darn ties on the back of my dress. 50 years, and Jane was still fulfilling her promise not to make me struggle with them. My dress was flowing and was emerald green. When the dress was perfect, Jane would allow nothing less. I embraced her. "Thank you for being more true of a sister than I could have imagined having," I told her. She hugged me even tighter. "Dmitri and I will both be out there tonight. You will be safe," she assured me. "I never doubt it when you're around," I told her. She accused me of being mushy on my anniversary, and the serious moment faded. Still, it was the truth. I'd never truly feared for my safety in the presence of Jane, Felix, or Dmitri. They would all three protect me with their lives, but even more importantly, they'd taught me how to be strong and protect myself and even made it possible for me to protect them. I found myself eager to see what would come next in our story. Charlie. I'd had offers from Bella and the elite guard to join me on this trip, but I truly felt that this was a journey I needed to take alone. My mate was mature now, a full 25 years old. It no longer felt to me like it would be cradle-robbing to approach her. So, only Hope, Keys, and I were making this trip, ND they had agreed to go back to Voltera once we'd found her. Well, they agreed once I promised them that I would call if anything or anyone so much as made me uncomfortable. Love had never been an easy thing for me. I'd waited in vain for Renee to return for years. Then Sue had sent me away for my devotion to the idea that my daughter still lived. It had never been easy for me to express my emotions. Though that had gotten better over the years, it was still a challenge. I needed to do this my way. I needed to proceed slowly and carefully and make sure to build a foundation for the relationship. In truth, I wasn't sure I deserved this gift and wanted to take it slowly enough that I could feel confident I wouldn't screw it up too badly. I was excited, nervous, and a little afraid. I knew that I now had much to offer the woman who was meant to be mine. Family, community, and thanks to Felix's guidance, a significant amount of wealth. Still, I felt somehow inadequate. Perhaps the problem was that what I was really offering, especially to my soulmate, was myself. I hadn't always made the best decisions, and I hadn't always had the quickest path or the most direct route to success. I'd always been a slow and easy kind of guy. However, the change was one choice I didn't regret. I would have been but a memory in Bella's history without it, and while I would change a great deal about my human life given the chance, my vampire one had been amazing. As if Keys read my thoughts, he sat down beside me on the plane and put his hand on my shoulder. "You're never alone," he said, repeating my long-ago words to him. Somehow this soothed my nerves and built my confidence. I told myself that I would resist the urge, once I knew who my mate was, to collect information on her to make my job easier. Felix had already offered his technical skills when I declined his offer of company. It was a nice thought, an easy thought, to pave my way to my mate, but I was old and perhaps a bit old-fashioned. I wanted to learn every detail about my mate from her own lips, and in her time. Once we knew exactly where we were going, all we knew so far was somewhere near Butte, Montana. I would find an apartment and enjoy every minute of getting to know her. As the plane touched down, my stomach knotted a bit, and Keys's grip on my shoulder increased. I was off on a new adventure, and despite my nerves, I couldn't wait. Dmitri, every moment with my Sora was a new adventure. We never tired of each other in the bedroom or out. Today, I was teaching her more about how to supervise the garden. What the individual duties of each position were. Someday, when the time was right and she was prepared, she would help me lead. I had no doubt. Another thing there was no need to doubt was the elite's support and assistance when that time of transition came. Every single elite guard had approached me at one time or another and assured me that Sora would be qualified to lead them someday and that when that time came, they would follow her as they follow me. Sora was now going out on training missions with me and learning to track using possessions of her targets. It had shocked me to my very core that after Elizor had announced her skill, and news spread, our most trusted allies had begun sending in small objects they had owned. Some came with a letter, others with a short note, and yet others with nothing at all. But they all knew that Sora would need practice to hone her gift and apparently had nothing to hide. Sora was most free outside the castle. She had adapted to life in Voltera easily. She fit in and even thrived there, but there was a joy about her when she was on a hunt that didn't exist within the castle walls. Perhaps it was also a trait of mine because I found me's feeling more and more free away from the castle. We probably took more of these training missions than were strictly necessary, but I made sure that nothing slipped through the cracks. I would not make another error. Today, we were following Garrett. I knew where he was, of course, having met him, but I was immensely pleased, if a little surprised, to find him still in Denali. I hadn't been sure that Kate was truly his mate. I'd never asked Marcus about it. I wished them many long and happy lifetimes together. We were greeted warmly in Denali and discussed what was happening with them as as the goings-on at the castle before we made our way out into the purple darkness of a moonless night. I was proud of Sora that she'd found her target totally on her own. She hadn't even missed a step on her journey. Her focus and control were both growing by leaps and bounds. They all seemed happy and content. I was pleased for them and shared my feelings with Sora on our run back to the plane. Sora told me that both the remaining sisters had appointments scheduled with Hope in the near future. For their sake, I hoped that their mates were alive in this time period and waiting to be found. The trip back to Voltera was long, so Sora and I made ourselves comfortable in the stateroom and made love for the entire flight. In all my imaginings of what my perfect mate would be like over the years, I'd never even been able to fathom this level of closeness and synchronicity. I was a lucky man, luckier than I ever thought I deserved. Bella, our education department was growing quickly as news of the Volturi's increasingly friendly disposition spread from Coven to Nomad and back to Coven. Hope's schedule had also expanded. Word of her gift had spread, and she was scheduled for a minimu. of one hunt a month for the next 5 years. I knew that would still leave her plenty of time with us and that the world desperately needed her gift, but her and Keys's frequent absences were a little unsettling. The vampires of the world, despite the activity of our spies, seem to mostly be policing themselves these days. The need for court attendance was at an all-time low, so we spent quite a bit of time training and improving ourselves. I was also learning languages. Caleb had been helpful, so when I found a scroll I couldn't read, I'd ask him to teach me the language. He seemed to enjoy teaching me Latin more than he had our French lessons, but he taught me both languages without complaint. Marcus and Angela spent much of their time educating vampires of all ages about our laws and customs. I didn't fool myself that peacetime would last forever, but I was beginning to agree with Marcus that education might reduce crime. I could take on both Dmitri and Felix now in combat training. Keys's lessons had served me well, but I was still not an equal for Keys. There was still work to be done. I wasn't sorry for that, either. I stayed busy stretching my capabilities in all areas. I couldn't stagnate. The Volturi couldn't stagnate. I wouldn't allow it. Aro and I made plenty of time for each other around our various duties and correspondence. You could often find us walking through the city speaking in low voices about our day in the evenings. Or when we had time during the day, our favorite destination was the gardens. We also spent every night together. Sometimes in a passionate embrace. Sometimes discussing the little things that truly mattered, and occasionally reading in companionable silence. I missed Charlie's presence in the castle, but his reports of his buoy LDING relationship with Rebecca indicated a slow and steady pace. Personally, I couldn't imagine moving so slowly when the mate bond pushed for relationship and connection, but this was his mate, and as mates were prone to be. She was on board with this slow build-up. I couldn't help looking forward to his return. Some part of me thought he might not actually return, and just the idea scared me. Read to coach myself that I would support whatever decisions he and Rebecca made, even if it was challenging. Even if he ultimately chose the wider world over Voltera. Tonight was movie night. Time Ad circled us back around to vampire movies. Jane groaned before everyone but always had a smile on her face. Tonight, we were watching Dracula, the original cut. The theater, which I'd designed with more than enough room at the time, was full to bursting. Some even sat on the floor or on their mate's lap to make more room. The critiques and criticisms of the films on movie night still made me laugh. Tonight's critique of the ancient cinematography techniques was especially harsh. Laughter and joy were by no means a new addition to Voltera, but I smiled every time I heard it. I thought that Voltera had regained some of its humanity with the addition of so many young, new members. It made life more real and more worth living for each of us. Aro and I made love till the sun streamed in our windows after movie night ended. It always surprised me that the bond strengthened further and that it could strengthen further. I loved him with a depth I would have thought impossible only a few short years ago. Hope's services were now booked solid for a full 5 years. I had 5 years full of helping provide happiness to our world. 5 years of trips to unknown destinations. 5 full years of living, learning, and growing with my mate. I was ecstatic. The thought that the list would likely grow longer only filled me with more happiness. In my not-too-distant past, I spent the majority of my time sitting on that damnably uncomfortable marble throne. I judged people guilty without hearing the first detail of their case. I was quick to anger and slow to cool. I hadn't believed humanity had any truly redeemable qualities, and I had lived with Athenadora's behavior. The saddest part is that I had thought it was enough. I had considered it satisfactory and not considered for even a moment that I might deserve more. That our supplicants might deserve more. I had been so wrong. I might not deserve Hope. I might never truly deserve her, but watching her grow up, aiding in the process, and being present for her shaped me into a man who could fully appreciate her many facets. I could challenge her and have her challenge me back. I could argue my points without getting angry. I could show her a gentle side of myself that most wouldn't believe existed. The most amazing thing is that she loves all of me. She loves the warrior with the capability to protect her. She loves the artist with the ability to show her a new side of the world. She loves the king, even if I get angry. She loves the scholar who challenges her thinking. I had never seen such love or considered that it might be out there for me, too. Until Bella appeared and changed us all. She didn't do it in obvious ways or with any sort of purposeful determination. It just sort of happened. A movie night here, a merciful judgment there. The light in her eyes when she ordered me, to feed, her endless compliments and unceasing affection. Slowly, bit by bit, she changed each and every one of us. Without meaning to, and prepared us for a brighter future. Hope's appearance had sped and finalized the transformation, but it all started with a mortal's apparent fearlessness in the face of the vampires who had wronged her. Now, the throne was still used, but it wasn't the focus of my universe. I guarded Hope as she brought our world genuine and profound joy. I escaped the confines of the castle regularly to hunt, to experience freedom, to live. We were currently on our way to Maine to find the mate of a nomad named Joseph. I marveled in the simplicity of doing something for a supplicant wit. No expectation of receiving anything in return. We were definitely different now. Hope was growing nervous at our slow pace after the plane landed. We moved faster. We would appear as nothing more a blur to any wildlife camera currently on the market. When we found her, she had fallen, and from my clumsy examination, she had broken her leg. The girl appeared to be in shock, and we were miles away from any reliable sort of medical care. Joseph begged me to change her. He was afraid that the combination of her injuries and the shock might kill her without someone who understood medicine nearby. I changed her, and he carried her gently to our nearest safe house. We didn't even know her name yet, and I feared she might regret the change, but it had felt like the only right thing to do at the time. He might have killed her trying to transform her, and that would have been truly tragic. I called Aro'S and Dmitri while Hope washed the dirt and grime from Joseph's mate. Bella was with when I called and automatically offered to come if she was needed. I assured her I could see a newborn through the initial blood hunger. I had Hope and Joseph with me. Hope had turned into quite a fighter under my guidance. And the presence of a mate, even an unacknowledged one, should help calm her. I offered Joseph a place with us for her newborn year, but he declined, saying he didn't do well with crowds like those that would exist in the castle. We had a month until our next assignment. Once Joseph could control her alone, he could take responsibility for her legally and physically. I assured him we'd see him through the initial problems and train him to be capable of taking over our duties before we left. I also promised him use of the safe house for the crucial year. I was thanked profusely, something I was still uncomfortable with. Then he went to hold her hand and comfort her the best he was able. Hope and I stayed on hand and nearby without crowding him. Nomads usually lived such lives because it was how they were comfortable, how they felt safe. There was no need to make him uncomfortable. Hope held my hand tightly. "I'm proud of you, she admitted. "I just did what anyone would do," I said. "No, you didn't do what was easy. You did what was right, knowing it would likely trap you looking over an unknown newborn for a full month," she said. I took her in my embrace. "It's what you would have done. Without thought, were you capable of changing someone?" Hope only nodded, and my discomfort changed to awareness. Kings used to not leave the castle without half an army to protect them. Awareness in this situation was called for, even if I didn't anticipate an actual threat. The 3 days of the unknown woman's transformation passed slowly. We made ourselves comfortable in the safe house. More than anything, I wanted to make love with my mate, but it felt somehow disrespectful to the transforming woman in the bedroom. Instead, Hope and I made plans, not tea for the newborn's awakening but for our future. We shared our ever-changing dreams and fantasies. We celebrated the simplicity of just being together. When the 3rd day began, Hope and I went to find some criminals who deserved to be fed to a newborn. We brought 5 back with us in a relatively short period of time. However, our newborn was beginning to awaken upon our arrival. Her heart was beating fast, her screams had increased, and her breathing was no longer the steady, regular occurrence it was in humans. Hope promised to keep watch and make sure the newborn's meal didn't escape. I went in to protect her and Joseph from the newborn and attempt to protect the newborn from itself. Immediately upon awakening, the newborn stationed herself, growling fiercely, in a corner. I was pleased that she hadn't gone for the window Joseph was guarding or the door I'd stationed myself in front of. I spoke softly and calmly to her until she settled. Then Hope and Joseph helped me escort her to her meal. It went about as I expected. She was a mess, her meal was now mangled bloodless corpses, and although feeding had calmed her, she looked about to run at any moment. Hope convinced her to shower and assisted with the process. While they were seeing to getting the blood off, I went to fetch the newborn's next meal. Frequent feeding would help her remain calm and hopefully prevent from running aimlessly in search of her own food. When Hope returned to me, I was informed the young woman's name was Tina and that she was beginning to remember snippets of her human life. Joseph and Tina settled on the couch. And Joseph explained what he was, what she now was. Explanations and Joseph's presence seemed to calm her more than her first meal had. Still, I knew the next month was likely to be challenging. Hope took a surprising amount of responsibility with the newborn. She ran with her endlessly through the trees, and they talked for hours about the vampire world and Tina's new place in it. Sometimes the conversations took place on the couch, and other times they took place out among trees. By the time the month passed, they were firm friends. It took some effort to prepare Joseph for our departure. But I was confident when we left that he was capable and willing to look after Tina on his own. We flew back to Voltera. I expected to be there for mere hours, but our next appointment had no mate currently out in the world. I found myself wishing we had better news for the male, but even Hope couldn't create a mate where none existed. We comforted him with Angela's story and assured him that just because she wasn't out there right now, it didn't mean that the search was hopeless. He left disappointed but not depressed. Hope and I made love for hours on our return from the castle. The last month had been too chaotic to maintain our connection physically. Of course, Felix and Heidi, Bella, and Angela checked on us but didn't stay. Bella, when the phone rang, I knew that it would be unwelcome news. As was usual, I was right. Charlie had been away from the castle for a full 2 years. He was calling to give me the good news that he'd changed his mate, which I was ridiculously excited about. But that they'd decided to open up a little fishing store on the coast. I made sure my voice remained excited. I made sure I sounded upbeat and encouraging. Inside, I was crying. I wanted my father with me. But I also wanted him to follow his passion and his dreams. Looking at it objectively, Charlie had taught the Kings and the Guard everything he knew about cleaning and staging a crime scene long ago. And his skill at picking out the liars who visited us wasn't really needed as much as it used to be. Court cases were still a rarity. I could see why he'd want to live out in the wider world. Though I would miss him fiercely. He promised to visit frequently, and I promised the same, but the exchange made me sad. When the call ended, Aro was there for me, and I curled into his lap and into his embrace and allowed myself to cry. Aro held me, offering silent, unwavering support as he always did. Jane opened the door to my office. I didn't know whether she had overheard the call or just my sadness. Still, she was there. She had always been there. When I calmed a bit, I explained the news to Jane, and she took my hand, promising that I'd see him again even if she had to drag him to the castle. Jane's threat made me chuckle, which was just what I needed. When I was settled again, Jane informed me that I had not met some of the newest lower guard yet. We went to remedy that error. And I met some wonderful people. It genuinely cheered me to spread just a little more love and a little more acceptance among the Volturi. With the mail came my book. The publication process had been long, drawn out, and occasionally tedious. Still, Aro escorted me proudly to the library and presented the book to the librarian for inclusion in the Volturi's collection. The librarian entered it in our databases immediately and shelved it in its appropriate spot. I gazed upon my work surrounded by all the other works held here for long minutes. This was the culmination of a human girl's dreams. And I promised myself I would continue my work on the series and even other, unrelated works. I wouldn't give up my dreams for any reason. When I tore myself away from my book, I went to check on Felix and Dmitri. I hadn't seen them enough recently. I told Felix about Charlie's decision, and he promised to call and offer to help them with the setup of the store. We ended up in the Elite Guard's recreation room playing a video game that required shooting hordes of zombies. Felix, Dmitri, Jane, and I had a great time. It was important to take a time out to be with friends on occasion. Aro. I returned to the library while Bella was busy to read her story. Her tale of a love that lasted through time was a reflection of mine and Bella's story without imitating it or becoming biographical in any way. I was proud of her skill and determination. Publishing her first book while working on others and helping rule the vampire world was no small achievement. Our duties might change during peacetime, but they certainly didn't disappear. Bella's laughter echoed through the floors from the elite recreation room. I had no idea what they were doing up there, but my mate was enjoying it and spending time with the guards that she was closest to. Her laughter warmed my no longer dead heart. I found myself reminiscing about Bella and my first meeting. The first embrace. The first time she sat on my lap and was declared queen. There were so many firsts, so many reasons to celebrate, and even a few reasons to mourn. Bella had brought life, kindness, love, devotion, and passion to me. I hadn't expected any of it. I hadn't prepared for such a drastic change to my world. Neither had the rest of the triumvirate nor the guard. I found myself amazingly happy with who we'd become. We'd become an organization, a coven, that could accept and adapt to change. Even Keys had found true happiness. We'd all grown and changed so much that I barely recognized who we used to be. I had feared softening in any way would make us be seen as weak in the vampire world. Instead, we were seen as more approachable. We were seen as honest. We were seen as an example of what other covens could be. We were firm when we needed to be. Our thirst for justice and order among our kind hadn't faded. We were still feared by lawbreakers worldwide. But the rest didn't feel the need to avoid us anymore. We helped others for no other reason than we could, and seeing it, participating in it, felt good. Jasper. Misty had been changed for 1 year today. She was a missing puzzle piece for the Whitlocks. For me, she was simply everything. For Peter and Charlotte, she was a little sister to look after and care for. She was still quiet and contemplative, except when around Peter. Apparently, when I wasn't around, my little mate became something of a spitfire. The two had been engaging in a prank war for the majority of her newborn year. It had taken her about 6 months to fill out to a weight that made her comfortable. When she'd looked in a mirror one day and then back at me and expressed her wish to turn, I was filled with joy. Not just the selfish kind, either. I was filled with joy for her that she'd come so far. Was happy in her life, and wanted to be in it for an eternity. I'd given her the option of an animal diet. I would have felt guilty not offering the option, but Misty chose to hunt criminals. Her choice was a relief to me. I didn't especially want to return to an animal diet, but I would have to help feed my mate. I'd told her my story, of course, even the painful bits. She had also shared hers. Life on the streets had been hard for her. Predatory behavior among the more powerful on the streets trickled down to the weaker. My heart broke for what she'd gone through. Luckily, many of the memories of struggle and hardship had faded with the change. The main thing she remembered from her human life was the feel of her mother's arms around her, the fateful day before her mother's life ended. I was complete in a way I could barely believe I deserved. I had caused hurt to so many, killed so many, but Misty loved me, not despite my darkness, but because of it, because of the whole of me. Misty had become better with the horses than anyone but me. If I didn't use my gift to soothe them when they got agitated, she'd probably be better with them than me too. I was proud of her accomplishments. Both large and small. She was free to be around humans unsupervised now. It had been one of her main goals when she changed. She wanted independence. She wanted to be able to walk the streets of town and feel like she belonged there if she chose to. She wanted to be able to shop for inconsequential things and feel confident that she would harm no one. Of course, no newborn in the Whitlock coven could exist without also learning to defend herself. Even though I was pretty sure Bella had destroyed all of our enemies too, I wouldn't leave my mate helpless. She took to the training amazingly well. She wanted to be able to protect me if we were ever in danger. The mere thought of someone protecting me both terrified and amazed me. We trained daily throughout her newborn year. I was willing to stop when she could defend herself well enough to buy time and protect herself till I could arrive and dispatch an assailant for her. She insisted on persevering until she was my equal in every way. When we asked Misty what she'd like to do to celebrate her newborn year ending, she thought for a moment and asked for another bonfire. I would have taken her to tour the world if she wanted. But she preferred a quiet evening with a roaring fire, guitars, and some whiskey. She was my match in every way. Alice would have asked for a trip to Milan. Wow, really thought about Alice or the Cullen Coven anymore. Still, Alice and I had never been a match. I had been wrong about so many things in that time of my life. I had Alice to control me through her science in the same way that Maria had controlled me through fear. Being allowed to separate from that mess was the best thing that had happened to me, except Misty, in my long life. I had learned who I was and become someone I was proud of in the process. I knew I was not without faults, but I'd accomplished a lot. I'd become someone who could stand strong or express the gentleness in my soul. I was free to be a philosopher when I chose. And Misty would actually challenge my thoughts. She hadn't completed endless degrees like me, but she had a sharp mind and a quick tongue when our discussions got intense. The bonfire was beautiful. Misty kept her hand in mine, and we listened, rapt, as Peter and Char took turns with the guitar. It was everything I hadn't dared to imagine for myself. This completeness, this sense of home, was something I was still growing accustomed to. I was surprised when Peter passed Misty the guitar. She sang about pain and strength and coming out the other side. Her voice was beautiful. I taught her to play as an additional way to control her strength, Peter admitted. I wrote it for you, Misty admitted. For a moment, I could see insecurity on her face. Did you like it? It was the best gift ever, I declared, hugging her tightly and almost destroying Peter's favorite guitar in the process. We kept the fire and conversation going till dawn, when we allowed it to go out in favor of caring for the horses. Misty and I had found a new horse only a few weeks back, who had been badly mistreated. The owner had thought her useless and was trying to sell her to Año. Fair rancher as bait to get rid of a wolf problem. Misty heard the negotiations, interrupted, and offered more for the horse than the rancher thought she was worth. He immediately agreed, and Sunshine came home with us. She was adapting slowly to safety and a full belly. Still, Misty and I sat on the fence daily and spoke to her in low, soothing voices. We asked nothing of her, and that seemed to bewilder the horse. But her ears now flicked toward us when we approached. She didn't spook when we sat down any longer. I considered it a good sign. Sunshine would eventually trust us. Such things took time. She'd had a hard, other life, too. Bella. It was 500 years to the day that I'd walked into Voltera with Felix and Dmitri at my side. I'd been trying so hard to be strong that day. I had thought I was walking to my death, either at Cullen's or Volturi's hands. Instead, I'd gotten a miracle I became more thankful for by the day. I allowed myself to reminisce. I'd been so confused when Aro had proclaimed me queen and the guard had knelt. So much had changed since then, but I remembered the passion that had filled me while I recounted my tale. I had concocted a punishment for T.H.E. Cullens with the dual purpose of punishing them and making it impossible for them to commit the same crime again. I remembered their faces. There had not been true remorse there, just fear of the consequences. I had learned as much about friendship, family, and loyalty as I had taught. It had taken a while for me to feel at home here and to truly believe my position was my own. I had grown, we had all grown, through the challenges that had faced us. The Volturi were now nothing like they'd been in those days, except that we still enforced the laws. We pulled together and worked together to accomplish our goals. Some members of our family had left to be part of the wider world through the years and returned to us after a taste of complete freedom, admitting it wasn't for them. Others had left and not returned. So we kept in contact and made sure they knew they were still part of us, even if they were separate. Marcus was the most changed of all of us. The population of vampires had expanded consistently as, one at a time, mates were found. He and Angela spent their time making sure the neophytes had everything they needed to not just survive in our world but to thrive in it. The D.E.Mond was so heavy that they'd recruited staff carefully from all levels of the guard to assist them in their efforts. Gone was the broken man. In his place was a vibrant vampire who was enjoying every minute of his eternal existence. Angela was radiant. Despite the demands of court, she'd retained some of her innocence while truly being Marcus's equal in every way. Lexi was now one of the most frequently sought-out seamstresses in Voltera. Her unique designs had transformed into some of the most beautiful and imaginative creations I could fathom. Adam was excelling still in the technological department and was often teaching one guard or another a newly released technology. Sora and Dmitri now led the guard together and did a wonderful job, better than either could have done alone. Their voices echoed through the castle frequently as I went about our work and made sure to maintain a connection to both of them that had only deepened over time. They worked hard, and they played hard, with frequent absences from the castle to see pieces of the world they wanted to visit. I had started collecting postcards they'd sent from their various trips. Felix and Heidi were one of the most closely connected couples I'd ever seen. Heidi still oversaw much of the human staff, as well as doing the fishing, and Felix dispensed justice, was our technology guru, and maintained things for Dmitri when he and Sora felt the need for freedom. Something about them together was special, though. You could see the love and adoration plainly in their eyes when they looked at each other. I hoped I looked at Aro like that. Hope was wonderful. She made an amazing and decisive queen while still making allowances when the punishment didn't fit the crime. She and Keys had helped so many in our community find their mates, sometimes sacrificing their time and effort with a newborn and their mate for a full year just to make sure that the couple got off to a great start. Keys still painted frequently. It kept him centered and grounded, he said, but he was perfect with Hope. Sometimes I could hear them debating deep into the night, on some point in philosophy or literature. Keys was still the quickest of us to anger. But now he was usually the first to cool as well. He truly listened in court cases, judging fairly and never complained when the demands of our jobs got taxing. He and Hope were partners in everything. And I couldn't have asked for more from him. Emmett was still alone, having never expressed any wish or desire to even see if a mate was out there for him. But he was happy, genuinely happy. He was the life of the party and had grown closer to all of us over the years. In addition to his technological work, he also trained the lower guard in combat now. He seemed to love challenging both his mind and his body. He was part of the family and part of the greater community. When he needed a break from the castle, he could often be found helping the covens of the LD learn what they needed to know about security and technology. He made a good teacher. Jane was my best and closest confidant. She was my sister. She'd never changed her mind that she was complete alone. So she never tried to seek out a mate. I sought her opinion on most things, and in addition to being an elite guard, she also acted as an assistant of sorts for me. Somehow, she still anticipated my needs and helped without being asked. Most of the time, she could be found with me when I wasn't spending alone time with Aro. I loved her fiercely. Charlie and Rebecca now had a chain of fishing stores along the eastern coast. I still missed him being a daily presence in my life, but I was so happy for him. He'd finally found love. He'd found commitment. He'd found passion. He even visited frequently. Sometimes, if business permitted, he and Rebecca stayed for months at a time. I liked Rebecca. She was amazing. What I liked more was her influence on Charlie. He'd become more emotionally available, more able to articulate what he was feeling, and softer. Even when he wasn't present, he was always available when I needed him. I was relieved that he'd never regretted his choice to join me in immortality. Jasper and Misty had healed each other completely. The Whitlocks were like an extended family, and Misty had made them complete. Misty was quiet and contemplative, like Jasper, and extremely intelligent. They were still raising horses and enjoying the peace. Jasper and Misty had insisted on opening a horse rescue called Another Life. They took in animals that had experienced harm and rehabilitated them. They had all found happiness, true happiness, and I was proud to call the Whitlocks friends. Aro and I were hard to describe. We loved each other with an intensity that still increased. Year by year and day by day. We worked together, played together, and wouldn't have it any other way. He'd shown me all his favorite places in the world, one destination at a time. He'd then taken me everywhere I'd wanted to go. I'd even seen Egypt just like I wanted to. Our love and commitment to each other defied description, and I never could have imagined, as the broken girl who walked into the castle, that I might someday have this. Ultimately, I was still me. I made sure to let every member of the Volturi know that they were seen and appreciated. I tried to give more than I took. And I still found occasional creative solutions and thought in ways that others didn't. I was uniquely me, and time had taught me that was a good thing. I was grateful for every vampire that SSED my path and learned as much as I could. There was an entire shelf of books in the library now that I had written under various versions of my name. The public seemed to like them. The guards seemed to like them. Aro frequently read them. Occasionally, I would hear him mutter something along the lines of, "What a unique mind I was blessed with." I had accomplished everything I had set out to. Except for the occasional rule breaking. Peace reigned in the vampire world. Injustices to those I love had been avenged and in such a way that they were not attempted again. It had been a long and winding road with dips and valleys on the way, but I was the luckiest vampire in the world. It was amazing to be queen. Lower guard. I checked my paperwork. Visitors to the jail were infrequent, so this was a boring post. I hoped that after I'd served a little more time and been around a little longer, I'd be promoted to one of the exterior guards. They had a good time. I could occasionally hear them teasing each other good-naturedly. Even down in the jails. The only oddity in my job was a severed head, long since petrified, sitting as if carefully placed in the center of one of the cells. Today was the day it was set to be destroyed. I followed the instructions to the letter. They said to contact Mistress Bella before throwing it into the incinerator. I wondered what in the world this woman might have done that was so offensive that she was left to petrify in the cells. I wondered how long she'd been down here. I wondered, but made the call. I tried to sound strong and confident while speaking with my queen. But I must not have succeeded. Her voice was very gentle. "Just toss it into the incinerator, Tony. That era has passed." I was shocked that our queen recognized my voice. There were others on my rotation. I did as she said. I even watched as the head was reduced to ash. Still, I wondered, So hereby ending this, let's move on to the next fanaffection audiobook. This is Midnight Swan. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to read this for you cookies.